Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I should have thrown everything away years ago, but something in me believed that as long as the boxes stayed stacked in my garage, the past would stay quiet. It was July 9th, 2021. The kind of day when heat pressed against the skin like a hand that wouldn't lift. I dragged half my life out to the patchy lawn in front of my duplex, telling myself a yard sale might buy me a little breathing room. I told myself it was ordinary, harmless, but deep down I knew what I was really doing, offering myself to strangers one object at a time. My name is Claire Redding, 32, night clerk at the Hollow Pines Motel on East Brookline Avenue, Toledo, Ohio. I wasn't supposed to be here. I'd planned on nursing school, a career spent helping people, but that ended when my mother got sick. By the time she was gone, so was the money, and all that remained was a string of low-wage jobs. The motel was supposed to be temporary. 4 years later, I was still there, watching the same guests drift in and out, smiling for people who never remembered my face. The tables I set up sagged with everything I had hoarded over the years. Old college textbooks, framed photos I didn't want to look at, lamps that flickered, clothes still smelling faintly of the houses I'd lived in before. My neighbor, Mrs. Halpern, wandered over with her wheezing dachshund and a cigarette. She poked one of the textbooks with a nicotine-stained finger. "Selling your brain," she joked. "Don't need it anymore," I said, forcing a smile. A little later, a lanky teen named Victor showed up, circling a cracked ceramic lamp. His voice wavered when he asked if it worked, as though he already expected to be laughed at. I told him it probably did. He counted out a few crumpled bills, grabbed it, and scurried off without looking at me again. For a while, the day felt almost light. People came and went, pawing through my junk, offering nickels for things I once thought mattered. The storm clouds were gathering, but still holding back. Then he arrived. The stranger walked up as if the storm had carried him with it. His overcoat dripped steadily, though the real downpour hadn't begun. He ignored everything on the tables until his pale fingers touched a stack of Polaroids. I froze. I hadn't put them out. They were wrapped in wax paper, the edges sticky. The top photo was warped, water-damaged, but I knew the shape of the room it showed. My stomach twisted. "Where did you find those?" I asked. He looked at me with the faintest smile. "They've always been yours." His voice was wrong. Wet, bubbling, like something gurgling up through a drain. Thunder cracked. The first sheets of rain swept the lawn. When I looked again, he was gone, but the Polaroids remained. That night, the storm broke hard. Windows rattled, lights flickered. I carried the leftovers inside, leaving wet trails across the carpet. When I went to bed, the Polaroids were everywhere, scattered on the floor, stuck to the bathroom mirror, spilling across the kitchen table. Each one showed me asleep. In the duplex bed, in the motel chair, in the narrow cot from my mother's house. Some went back years, back to times I'd thought no one was near me. My pulse thudded. I grabbed an armful, dropped them in the sink, and lit a match. They curled, darkened at the edges, but the flame went out with a hiss. I tried again. Nothing. The Polaroids wouldn't burn. A pounding rattled the front door. I opened it to find Victor drenched, his face streaked with blood pouring from his eyes. He shoved one of the photographs against my chest. It was the same as the others, me, asleep. He collapsed at my feet, screaming for me to help. I slammed the door. His cries merged with the thunder until I couldn't tell them apart. I ran. I don't remember locking up or even grabbing shoes. The rain soaked me in seconds, but I didn't stop until the Hollow Pines Motel glowed ahead, its neon vacancy sign pulsing through the sheets of water. I pushed through the glass doors, dripping and breathless. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew and lemon cleaner. The clock above the counter ticked steadily, hands pointing to a time I didn't want to believe. July 9th, 2018. 3 years gone in an instant. From then on, the storm never ended. Guests arrived carrying boxes that belonged to me. One dropped my old record player onto the counter, whispering $2. Another left my mother's perfume bottle, whole and filled despite the fact that I'd smashed it years ago. $5, she said. They never bought anything. They just whispered prices. The motel itself began to change, the carpet stained with shapes like camera shutters. The vending machine clicked in a rhythm like a photo being taken. The clock ticked backward sometimes, though never enough to catch. The Polaroids appeared in places I couldn't avoid. Mail slot, under pillows, inside folded towels in the empty rooms. Always me, asleep, caught from impossible angles. I tried to throw them away, flush them, even shred them. They always came back. I searched for Victor after that night but couldn't find him. His house was dark, though the lamp he'd bought from me glowed faintly in the window. His bicycle rusted in the yard. I stopped knocking. Sleep was dangerous. I dreamed of the stranger in the soaked overcoat standing outside the motel's glass door, watching, hands folded. His face was always shifting, features sliding like water. Sometimes I woke to Polaroids stuck against my skin, damp and curling. The more I tried to quit, the deeper I sank. I told the motel owner I couldn't work nights anymore. He nodded vaguely, said he'd find someone else. But the next night I was back behind the counter. Whether I wanted to be or not, I thought maybe I could get ahead of it. I brought in my own things, bracelets, sweaters, even my mother's death certificate. Guests touched them, whispered their numbers, and left them behind. My life was being tallied like merchandise. I was becoming inventory. Reflections betrayed me. In the motel bathroom mirror, my face flickered like static, eyes wider than they should have been. Once I woke in the lobby chair to find 3 guests staring at me, silent, each holding photographs of me holding photographs. The recursion spiraled until I vomited into the wastebasket. When I looked again, they were gone. The storm pressed on, air thick with mildew, walls blooming with mold that curled like writing I almost understood. Guests arrived nightly, whispering their prices. My belongings multiplied, and then one night Victor returned. I heard him before I saw him, pounding against the glass. When I ran out, there he was, soaked, eyes hollow, holding the cracked ceramic lamp. Its light pulsed weakly, trembling. "Claire," he whispered. "Victor," I said, pressing a hand to the glass. "I thought you—" "Don't say it," his voice cracked. "Don't give them anything else. They'll take all of you." I yanked at the door, but it wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. "Who?" I asked. "Who are they?" He lifted the lamp. For a moment, the rain outside froze. Droplets hung in the air like beads on strings, unmoving. Behind him, the storm was silent, painted across the night. "They've always been yours," he said, the same words the stranger had used. The lamp shattered in his hands. Light burst, glass slicing the air. When I blinked, he was gone. Polaroids covered the threshold, dozens, maybe hundreds. I picked one up. It showed me, standing behind the counter, holding a Polaroid. The very same one. Something broke inside me. I stopped resisting. Now every night is July 9th, 2018 and 2021 at once. The motel breathes with whispers. Guests don't carry luggage anymore. They bring me. My boxes, my belongings, my moments, my body piece by piece. Sometimes I think I'm just one of the Polaroids, an image repeating itself, sold over and over at a yard sale that never ends. Other times I imagine the stranger in the overcoat waiting beyond the glass, smiling, waiting for me to name my price. The storm pounds on. The photographs spread. I should have thrown everything away years ago, but now I know everything has already been sold. The storm never stopped. It pressed against the Hollow Pines motel with the weight of a tide, saturating the walls, seeping into my lungs. Guests came and went, but they weren't travelers anymore. They were collectors, archivists, carrying fragments of my life like offerings. The first man had left my record player. The woman after him placed my mother's perfume bottle on the counter. Each time they whispered their price. I didn't argue. I didn't reach for change. I only watched as my history stacked higher, cataloged but never bought. I tried ignoring them, pretending to check people in like before, but even that felt absurd. Their names blurred, their eyes slipped out of focus, and when I blinked too long, they became Polaroids themselves, flat, glossy surfaces staring back at me. The clock above the desk ticked without pause, its hands spinning between 2018 and 2021, never settling, as if time itself couldn't decide where to put me. Sleep became dangerous. The chair behind the counter grew harder each night, but whenever I drifted, the stranger came. His soaked overcoat clung to his shoulders, dripping onto the lobby floor, though the water vanished before it pooled. He would stand beyond the glass door, hands folded, face blurred as if under running water. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The photograph spoke for him. One morning, I think it was morning, I found the lobby wallpaper sagging damp. Behind it, hundreds of Polaroids had been pasted directly to the plaster. They showed me at the motel desk, head drooping, eyes half closed, mouth slack with exhaustion. My movements, my gestures, my nights, all recorded without me knowing. I tore them down in fistfuls, but more waited beneath, layered so thick I couldn't reach the wall. The mildew smell followed me into the rooms. Room 3 with its twin beds had photographs tucked under the mattresses, each one showing me in different stages of undress. Room 7's bathroom mirror reflected not me but the stranger's wet overcoat, hanging heavy on my shoulders. The guests noticed nothing. They set down my belongings, whispered their prices, and walked away. I stopped fighting. I had tried burning the Polaroids, shredding them, flushing them. None of it worked. They resisted destruction like living things. Fire died on contact, blades dulled, water whispered back. I accepted they were stronger than me, but I still searched for Victor. His absence gnawed at me. The boy who had warned me not to give them more. I walked to his house once more, down streets where rain never stopped. His bicycle was gone, the lamp missing from the window. The front door was ajar. Inside, the air smelled of wet plaster and electricity. Polaroids lined the walls in careful grids, each one of me. In the center of the living room stood the cracked ceramic lamp, somehow whole again, glowing faintly. On the floor beside it lay a photo of Victor himself, eyes closed, mouth parted in sleep. I left before the light flickered out. Back at the motel, the storm thickened until it was all I could hear. The neon sign outside sputtered, bathing everything in pulses of red. My reflection no longer kept up with me. It blinked too slowly, its lips moving in words I didn't say. Then one night, 3 strangers arrived together. They didn't look at me, didn't ask for a room. They placed 3 boxes on the counter. The first box held the sweater I wore at my mother's funeral, still damp with that July rain. The second held the key to my old apartment, the one I had dropped in a sewer grate the day I moved out. The third was empty, except for a single Polaroid of me, standing behind the counter, staring at the 3 boxes. I laughed then, a sharp cracked sound. "What's the price?" I asked, my voice breaking. All 3 answered in unison. "You already paid." They vanished. The boxes remained. After that, I stopped distinguishing between guests and photographs. People passed through, flat and flickering, their edges curling like old prints. They carried things I hadn't lost yet. My motel key ring, my current shoes, even the chair I sat in. I watched myself disappear. The storm no longer felt external. It filled me. My pulse beat in thunder. My breath hissed like rain on glass. My skin smelled of wet film. I dreamed in negatives, white shadows, and black light. One night I woke with Polaroids pressed against my chest. They showed me asleep at the counter, asleep in the chair, asleep in the motel bed. Beneath those were new ones I hadn't seen before. They showed me outside the motel, barefoot, standing in the yard sale again. The tables were there, the boxes, the cracked lamp. The strangers circled, whispering, touching my things. But this time I wasn't behind the table, I was on it, priced, tagged, waiting. I didn't know what that meant, not fully. But I felt it in my bones, the yard sale had never ended. The motel was just another table. The guests were buyers, and I was the last item left. The next time I saw Victor, he wasn't outside the glass. He was inside, sitting in the lobby chair across from me, dripping water onto the carpet. "Claire," he said softly. "Am I still me?" I asked. He shook his head. "You're what they made you. Who are they?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a Polaroid across the counter. I picked it up. It was blank at first, white, but slowly an image bled through. My own face, eyes wide, mouth open, caught in the moment of seeing the photograph. I dropped it. The photo landed on top of the pile already spread across the counter, indistinguishable from the rest. When I looked up, Victor was gone. The storm pounded harder, though maybe it was just my heartbeat. Now every night, guests arrive with more of me. Photographs, belongings, pieces of memory I don't recall giving away. They whisper prices I can't afford, and still they take. I don't resist. Resistance is useless. Sometimes I catch my reflection smiling when I'm not. Sometimes I hear the stranger in the soaked overcoat laughing softly from the hall. Sometimes I think the yard sale was only the beginning of something endless. And sometimes, late in the night when the storm is loudest, I imagine the final Polaroid waiting somewhere, already developed, already priced. It will show me gone and someone will whisper sold. should have kept driving. That thought hits me every time I wake in the middle of the night, slick with sweat, heart racing to a rhythm I can't hear but somehow still feel. If I'd ignored that crooked cardboard sign, maybe I wouldn't still be listening for bells no one else can hear. Maybe I wouldn't still be waiting for glass to rattle in the dark. My name is Rachel Quinn. I was 28 the summer I almost died in a stranger's driveway. By day, I shelved paperbacks at Gibson's bookstore, Concord, New Hampshire. By night, I drank boxed wine until the corners of the world softened, and the divorce papers waiting on my kitchen counter blurred into something I didn't have to face yet. I was a woman in pieces, half pretending to hold it together, half waiting for something, anything, to shatter me for good. It was July 3rd, 2017. Heat pressed down from every direction, relentless, suffocating. My sister Allie rode shotgun, legs propped on the dash, teasing me in the way only sisters can. "You seriously think you'll find happiness in somebody's old junk, Rach?" "Treasure hunting," I said. "Maybe something small, meaningless. A distraction." Allie shook her head but didn't argue. Curiosity tugged me forward, stronger than sense. Then I saw the sign, "Yard Sale, 18 Valley Crest Road," an arrow pointing east like an invitation or a dare. Valley Crest was supposed to be charming. Instead, the house at the end looked abandoned. Grass brittle, windows black, sun-baked siding cracked and peeling. 2 card tables sagged under trinkets, dolls with glass eyes, cracked china, ornaments smelling faintly of mildew and cinnamon. An old man sat on the porch, rocking. He didn't wave, didn't speak, just nodded once as though he'd been expecting us. Allie muttered, "Creepy," but I moved closer. My fingers brushed cold porcelain, chipped edges. My heart thrummed, but I told myself it was just the heat. Then I saw it, a snow globe. Inside, a miniature Victorian street, lampposts, carolers frozen mid-song. I lifted it, glass biting my palms. I shook it and flakes fell like real snow. The air changed, sharp and cool, cutting through the oppressive heat. Allie stiffened. "Did you hear that?" A faint jingling. Sleigh bells on non-existent wind. I laughed too loud, set the globe down, but the old man leaned forward. His lips rasped. "Once you wake them, they don't go back to sleep." His eyes didn't blink. The dolls rattled, glass teeth chattering. Allie grabbed my wrist. "We need to go, Rach." We turned, but the driveway stretched impossibly. The table scraped closer, wood on asphalt grating like bone. I don't remember running, only stumbling, lungs tearing, Allie screaming. Reaching the car, I looked back. The porch was empty. The man, the tables, the dolls, all gone. Only bells fading like laughter buried under snow. From that moment, the heat felt wrong. Cinnamon lingered where there should be none. I heard rattling in my apartment at night, delicate, deliberate. Yard sales bloomed across Concord, arrows pointing toward forgotten things. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Some collections aren't meant to be broken. Some things wait and wait until you shake them awake. The first week, I told myself it was heat stroke, hallucination. Panic sisters could whip each other into. Allie never mentioned it. Silence weighed heavier than words. Every glance from her reminded me she hadn't forgotten. The haunting started immediately after Valley Crest. Bells threaded the air, faint but insistent. Plates shifted, glass tapped. Shadows lingered where they shouldn't. Mirrors reflected movements that weren't mine. I questioned my mind, but paranoia alone didn't explain the snow globe appearing on my nightstand. The flakes drifting inside, or the whispers that sometimes came through the walls, impossible but tangible. I tried routine, tried work. Shelving books, sorting paperbacks, helping customers, it should have been grounding. But every bell over the door made my chest hammer. Every footstep in the aisle felt predatory. Once I climbed the mezzanine to investigate a clatter, half expecting porcelain teeth to rattle in my face. Nothing. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling the world had shifted. Some invisible weight pressing down on the air itself. By mid-July, fear had replaced distraction. I slept with lights on, knives within reach, doors locked, blinds drawn. Every shadow felt alive. I stopped drinking, desperate to keep my senses sharp. Bells, cinnamon, rattling, they never ceased. Allie called occasionally, her voice brittle. I see them sometimes in stores, in the parking lot. "Rach, it's real. They're following us." I didn't respond immediately. What could I say? They existed outside normal rules. Outside reason. The dolls, the snow globe, the children, whatever it was, had crossed into our world and we were marked. The nights worsened. Bells woke me. Shadows stretched. Plates rattled. I tried to reason it away, to convince myself it was exhaustion or imagination. But when a small hand pressed against the refrigerator, leaving a frost-like imprint that vanished before I could touch it, I knew better. One night, the snow globe appeared on the counter, though I hadn't placed it. Inside, the carolers moved. Figures crawled from beneath furniture, sliding closer. Eyes glassy and black, mouths open in silent song. They were not alive, not dead. They waited for me to notice. I dropped the knife, heart hammering, backing against the wall. They paused, tilting heads, curious. Flakes fell inside the globe. Sleigh bells rose in my ears. I understood then, some awakenings are irreversible. I ran. Out the door, bare feet on hot pavement, through empty streets. The jingling pursued me, indistinguishable from my own panicked heartbeat. By dawn, I reached a diner, trembling over a cup of coffee. Days blurred. Shadows moved differently. Mirrors reflected more than my own image. I avoided mirrors, noticing faint shapes in peripheries. I left offerings, candles, small toys, plates of cookies, hoping to appease whatever had crossed into my world. It helped only slightly. Bells persisted, cinnamon never fully left. Allie appeared pale one evening. "They're following me too," she admitted. Eyes wide, haunted, silence fell between us. Two sisters trapped, bound by a yard sale and a snow globe, knowing the world had shifted beneath our feet. By late July, avoidance became impossible. Signs and arrows everywhere reminded me of the door we had opened. Some things are better left undisturbed. Some, once awakened, never sleep again. By August, the jingling had grown louder, sharper. It threaded through walls, followed me to work, traced my steps across Concord. I avoided yard sales, avoided mirrors, avoided anyone who might see what I had become. A woman aware of something just beyond reality. I dreamed constantly. Valley Crest, the old man. Tables scraping closer, dolls rattling, children sliding along floors watching. Sometimes Allie appeared in dreams, eyes wide, hands reaching. The jingling followed me even into the daylight. One night it crescendoed. Bells clear, crisp, coming from the kitchen. I gripped the knife. Snow globe on the counter. Flakes drifting lazily, carolers staring, mouths frozen in silent song. Shadows flickered along the walls. Small figures emerged, crawling from corners. Tiny hands pressed against cabinets, vanished before my eyes could focus. I realized they weren't just following. They were inviting me. I ran again, barefoot, through empty streets, stopping only when exhaustion forced me into the arms of a diner booth. Coffee burned, hands shook, heartbeat deafening. Bells still threaded through the air. Cinnamon overwhelmed the senses. I understood then. The world I had returned to was no longer mine. Not entirely. I scoured libraries, searching for anything on cursed objects, haunted items, children lost to strange phenomena. I found fragmented stories, nothing concrete. Adults driven mad, vanished children, cursed possessions. None answered the question that mattered: how to survive the attention of something that had chosen me. Allie called less, spoke less. But when she did, it was brittle, urgent, everywhere. I hear them, I see them. They're real. She sounded exhausted, haunted, trapped. I didn't argue. I only listened, understanding we were bound together, marked by the same invisible tether. By late summer, I learned to move cautiously. Shadows watched. Bells jingled. Cinnamon lingered. I left small offerings, cookies, candles, old toys. It tempered the attacks, made the presence bearable but never gone. Some nights, the children appeared, crawling from walls, edges of perception, waiting for the acknowledgement that I alone could give. One night, I returned to my apartment to find the globe on the doormat. Heavy, glassy, flakes drifting, children staring. I knelt, hands trembling, knowing I had a choice. Shake it again, acknowledge them, or leave it, accept the unknown consequences. I shook it. The flakes fell thick and slow. Bells rang. Shadows stretched. Tiny fingers pressed against walls. I understood awakening them was an invitation. They had waited for someone willing to notice, willing to interact, willing to see. I do not know what became of Allie. Some nights I hear her voice in the jingling, whispering my name. Some nights she appears in the periphery, smiling faintly as though part of that world now. And me, I am still here, listening, watching, waiting. Some nights I walk the streets of Concord, eyes scanning for yard sale signs. arrows pointing toward forgotten things. Some things are better left alone. Some, once awakened, never sleep again. Every July, the heat feels wrong. I smell cinnamon where there is none. I hear the faint rattle of porcelain teeth in the dark. And every time I wonder if somewhere, just beyond sight, the children wait for the next person brave or foolish enough to shake the globe. Because once you wake them, they don't go back to sleep. The Lantern Inn smelled like something sick trying to pass as clean, and maybe that's why I took the job. I knew rot when I saw it. My name is Claire Harwood, and I was 26 the summer I moved to Brookhaven, North Carolina. It wasn't ambition that landed me there. It was necessity, the kind that gnaws through your stomach lining until you stop dreaming about what you want and settle for what will keep you alive. My mother's hospital bills had stacked taller than I could bear. Stage 3 COPD. She couldn't work, couldn't breathe without the plastic hiss of oxygen in her nose. I was all she had left. Brookhaven was cheaper than Raleigh, cheaper than anywhere I'd ever lived. Rent for a one-bedroom half-duplex, $510. Cleaning job at the Lantern Inn, 1145 Willow Drive, $9.25 an hour, cash under the table. I told myself it was a stepping stone, but in truth it felt like being swallowed. The inn crouched low on the roadside, its peeling yellow paint like skin after a bad sunburn. The sign buzzed a tired neon lantern that only flickered half the time. The T dead, so it read Lantern. Even at noon, the parking lot smelled like wet cardboard and cigarettes. Inside, bleach burned your nostrils, but beneath it lurked something worse. Mildew, or maybe just age. At first, the work was bearable. Strip beds, scrub toilets, empty ashtrays, repeat. But the quiet was heavier than I expected. Guests came and went without faces sticking in my memory. And silence, I learned, could rot you from the inside. It was July 19th, 2017. A Saturday so hot the air clung to my arms like damp fabric. That was the day Mrs. Callahan leaned over her fence and called, "We're having a yard sale tomorrow, honey. You need things to make that little place yours. Come by, pick through what we don't need." I nodded. I didn't have money for things, but I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of work in weeks. Loneliness had a way of starving me worse than hunger. The Callahan's yard sale looked ordinary. Tables sagged with faded picture frames, cracked teapots, paperback novels curled from humidity. Children darted between folding chairs with lemonade cups sweating in their hands. The neighbors mingled beneath wilting maple trees. I pretended to browse, smiling at strangers I didn't know. But then I saw it, half hidden beneath a card table stacked with old lampshades. A trunk, its wood blackened as though it had been through fire. The iron clasp, rust-eaten and swollen, held tight like a scar. The surface wasn't smooth. When the light shifted, I could see faint curves etched into the char. Patterns like veins or roots burned deep. I crouched, reaching to touch it. But before my fingers brushed the lid, Mr. Callahan's voice cut sharp. Not for sale. He wasn't loud. He was low, almost a whisper, but the kind that slid under your skin. His face drained pale in the heat, his eyes darting from me to the trunk, then back. "You don't want that," he added, barely moving his lips. Something in me froze. He looked afraid, not annoyed, not protective of some heirloom. Afraid. I pulled back, mumbled an apology, and stood. My skin prickled as though I'd touched something forbidden without meaning to. That night at the inn, the air in room 3 felt heavier. As I stripped the sheets, I smelled smoke, faint, sharp, sweet-sick, like wood burned with something else inside. Then came the sound, metal scraping across the hall. I opened the door. The corridor was empty, only the sour light of the buzzing fixture overhead and the faint trace of char still clinging to my nose. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, the trunk waited in my dream, at the end of my bed, its lid rattling as if something inside pressed upward, desperate to climb free. I woke shaking. 2 days later, as I left for work, I saw it again. Not in my apartment, not yet. But on the curb outside at the edge of the street, the same trunk, blackened wood, iron clasp, sitting as though someone had put it out with the trash. I stopped dead. My pulse stuttered. It hadn't been there when I came home the night before. I told myself it was coincidence, just another old trunk, but when I crossed the street, I saw the patterns on the surface. Curves burned into the grain like twisted veins. It was the same one. I didn't touch it. I walked faster, head down, throat tight. But all day at the inn, the smell clung to me. Charred wood threaded with something sweet. Not sugar, something sweeter, stickier. Like rotting fruit. That evening, a black smear stained my kitchen linoleum. A smudge the size of a handprint. My breath caught. I scrubbed until my knees ached, but the mark only spread. The next night, I found a small object on my living room rug. A square of blackened wood, no bigger than a coaster. The same grain, the same burned pattern. I didn't bring it in. I threw it out. But in the morning, it was back, sitting neatly on my pillow. That was when I told Elena. She was in the supply closet folding rough towels. Her face was drawn, her hands red from bleach. I whispered everything, the trunk, the smell, the smudge, the burned wood. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was crazy. She only shook her head and whispered, "Don't touch what doesn't belong here. Some things travel with you." Her words should have been nonsense. Instead, they lodged deep like gravel in my teeth. That night, the trunk wasn't on the curb. It was in my living room, square on the rug, clasp locked, waiting. The air felt dense, sweet, and wrong, like heat trapped in a closed car. When I touched the lid, the wood was cold. Not cool, cold like something pulled straight from the ground. My palms burned from it, I couldn't breathe. I backed into the kitchen, eyes locked on it, waiting for it to move. It didn't. Not then, but I didn't sleep. Because every time my eyes drifted shut, I heard it, muffled thuds from inside. The sound of something shifting, hitting the walls like someone trapped. I stopped answering my mother's calls. Not because I didn't want to hear her voice, but because the trunk made the apartment feel too crowded for words. Every time the phone rang, I stared at the black shape in the living room, afraid the sound might wake it. The smell grew stronger. At first scorched wood, then something sweeter, syrupy, cloying, like fruit left too long on a windowsill, buzzing with flies. The air grew thick, heavy. My curtains drooped as though damp, though the weather outside was dry. I tried to drag it outside once. The trunk was heavier than it had any right to be. My hand slipped on the iron clasp, skin burning from the cold of it. By the time I pulled it across the threshold, sweat was streaming down my back. That's when the clasp snapped open. Not wide, just a sliver. Enough. I saw darkness inside, but not empty darkness. Something shifted, and then through the gap a pale shape, an eye, unblinking, round, wet. It fixed on me, not like it was looking at me, but into me as though measuring. My knees buckled. I let go. The lid slammed shut. I dragged the trunk back inside, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me whispered I had no choice. After that, the sounds changed. No longer just thuds. Sometimes scratching. Sometimes a low, slow drag like fingernails across wood. Sometimes a voice, too muffled to make out, pressing against my skull like it came from underwater, Elena noticed. She stopped me in the hallway at work, her weary eyes sharper than usual. "You look thinned out," she said softly. I almost told her everything. About the eye. About the sounds. About the way my apartment wall sweated at night, as though the trunk's rot was seeping outward. But her expression changed. Not pity, fear, like she already knew. I only nodded, days blurred. I barely ate. My hands blistered with pale scars from trying to push the lid shut when it rattled. Sometimes I woke on the floor, cheek pressed against the rug, the trunk inches from my face. The worst was the smell. It shifted, from sweet rot to something sharper, chemical, burnt hair. Then back again, sickly sweet, almost pleasant until I gagged from the weight of it. The inn became my only refuge. Its mildew and bleach almost felt clean compared to my apartment. But even there, the silence pressed harder. Sometimes in the empty rooms, I heard the muffled scrape of a clasp. One night after scrubbing down room 6, I lingered in the corridor. The lights flickered, and for a moment I saw it, the trunk at the end of the hall. Sitting perfectly still, I blinked and it was gone. I stopped sleeping altogether. My skin prickled constantly. I jumped at the buzz of the neon sign outside, at the rustle of the trees. Finally, one night I snapped. I told myself I had to end it. That if I opened the trunk fully, I'd know what I was fighting. That maybe, if I looked it in the face, it would let me go. I sat cross-legged on the rug, my palms against the cold wood. The smell was unbearable, sharp and sweet and burning all at once. My throat closed. The clasp shuddered, then clicked open, slow as a yawn. The lid creaked. Inch by inch, inside was not darkness. Not exactly. It was something deeper, thicker, like a hole cut into the world. and from within, shapes pressed against the opening, hands or what looked like hands, too long, too many joints. Then the eye again. Wide, pale, unblinking, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My whole body locked as though the trunk had claimed me, held me in place. And in that stillness I understood something. It hadn't chosen me because I was strong or special. It had chosen me because I was easy, lonely, desperate enough to go hunting for treasure in other people's cast-offs. I was prey. The lid groaned wider, and then I saw it. Saw myself, not a reflection. Not a trick of the eye, but my own face inside the trunk. Hollow-eyed, lips split, skin gray as ash, staring back at me with the same pale, unblinking gaze. My breath hitched. My vision swam. The air was syrup-thick, sweet and suffocating. And when the lid creaked fully open, I didn't run. I didn't scream. I only stared, knowing with bone-deep certainty that whatever was inside was meant for me all along. I used to think quiet was safety. That silence meant nothing could creep close without me noticing. But I've learned that stillness can hold its own kind of violence. That it makes the smallest sounds carry. The tiniest shifts in air feel like warnings. My name is Danielle Mercer, I'm 32, and the night I opened my driveway to strangers, I also opened something I can't close again. I didn't come to Harrison Township for charm. I came because it was cheap, anonymous, and close enough to the pharmacy where I worked nights that I could drag myself home before daylight cracked. My duplex was one of 5 nearly identical structures squatting on Crocker Boulevard. Brick facades, sagging porches, flags that had long since bled their colors into exhaust. Mine was 37140, the one with a front lawn just big enough for weeds to grow proudly between tufts of grass I never mowed on time. It was supposed to be temporary, a holding pattern while I scraped my way out of the mess left behind by my father's failed construction business. Debt collectors didn't care that he was gone. They only cared my name shared his. So I worked. Nights I saved what I could, and I lived like a ghost in my own home. That July, the 19th of 2019, the air was thick enough to drink. A heat wave had settled over Macomb County, pressing sweat into skin before the sun even cleared the horizon. The duplex felt like a kiln. My fridge hummed against the emptiness inside. Bills lay unopened on the counter like they were breeding. I wanted space. I wanted air. More than that, I wanted a little money. So I dragged my unwanted past out of closets and boxes and called it a yard sale. I started early, before the heat became unbearable. The back room, my father's old storage space, was the worst part. The smell of him clung there, that sharp medicinal cologne he used to wear to hide sweat. I hated opening the door, but I forced myself through, tugging boxes one by one onto the driveway. By the time I had a shaky lineup of dishes, mugs, purses, and a few unopened Christmas gifts I'd never wanted, my neighbor Patrice had wandered over. Patrice was retired now, a teacher who had lived in this neighborhood since before I was born. Her voice carried like church bells, cheerful but edged with something that suggested she didn't miss much. She waved a church bulletin against her face as she stepped across the lawn. "People will buy anything if the sun's out," she said, sandals slapping the pavement. She leaned over one of my boxes and clucked. "Lord, hon, you kept all this? These dishes are vintage now. My kids would call it retro." I managed a smile. With Patrice, that was all you could do. She meant well, but her cheer scraped against me when I was raw. Customers trickled in around 8, couples with coffees, men in baseball caps, mothers tugging kids. They fingered old sweaters, bargained down to quarters, shook their heads when I offered too high. The sun climbed, relentless. By 9, Eli appeared. My younger brother, still wiry like when he was a teenager, sweat streaking his t-shirt from a bike ride. He shoved an iced coffee into my hand before I could protest. "Half this stuff still has tags, Danny. You've got a hoarding problem," says the guy who won't throw away his high school jerseys. He grinned. We laughed. That's what we did. Pretend nothing was wrong. Joke so the weight didn't crush us. Eli knew about the bills. He'd seen them stacked like bricks on my counter. He just never said it outright. The first shift came quietly. I noticed him standing at the end of the driveway, a man in a pale gray suit. He didn't look like anyone else in the neighborhood. Slicked hair, polished shoes that didn't belong on suburban asphalt. He wasn't browsing, he wasn't moving, just watching. I tried to brush it off, public sale, public street, but unease prickled sharp, like the first cold drip of sweat down your back. When I looked again, he was gone. The morning passed in waves of chatter and haggling, but things began appearing I hadn't put out. A mirror, oval-shaped, rimmed in flaking gold, leaned against the garage. Its surface was smeared gray, like smoke had been pressed into glass. I knew I hadn't brought it out, yet customers paused at it, ran fingers along its frame, asked, "How much for this?" "Not for sale," I stammered, dragging it back. Later, among the paperbacks, I found a box of VHS tapes. The labels were, handwritten in curling black marker, home, keep, and one that made my stomach dip, Danielle. When Patrice saw them, her cheer faltered. "Where'd you get these, hun?" "I don't know." She frowned, gaze holding longer than I liked. By noon, the sun was brutal. Sweat glued my shirt to my back. The crowd thinned. Patrice waved herself back to her shaded porch. Eli lingered, shifting from foot to foot. "Want me to stay?" he asked. "I've got it. Go." Pride sharpened my voice, even as something in me wanted him to insist. He didn't. He pedaled away, leaving the quiet too thick. When the last car rolled off, I gathered the leftovers. Shadows stretched across the driveway, long and strange. That's when I saw him again. The man in the gray suit. Beneath the streetlight. His lips moved silently, hands folded in front of him like prayer. I froze, box in my arms. My throat went dry. He didn't move closer, didn't blink, just watched. I shoved the box inside, slammed the door, checked the lock once, twice, 3 times. But unease doesn't stay outside. It seeps through walls. That night, the house spoke wrong. Not creaks of wood, but the slow, deliberate groan of weight shifting where no one should be. At 2 a.m, the stairs groaned. I lived alone. My breath froze. Barefoot, I shoved my dresser against the bedroom door, heart jackhammering. Every nerve screamed, "You are not safe." I clutched the lamp like a weapon, eyes fixed on the knob. When I finally called the police, my voice broke so badly the dispatcher asked me to repeat myself. 2 officers swept through the duplex. They found no one, no forced entry, just the boxes, stacked differently than I remembered, and a note pinned to the fridge, written in my father's handwriting. Words I hadn't seen since before he died. "You sold the wrong things." I stared at it until my vision blurred. The officers exchanged looks they didn't voice. They left. I didn't sleep. I don't think I've slept since. I told myself the morning would make it easier. Sunlight has always been the cleanser, hasn't it? It burns away the cobwebs and shows you what's real, what's dust, what's nonsense. But when I woke, the light felt thin, like it was struggling to push through the blinds. My kitchen smelled faintly sour, like old rain-soaked wood. I made coffee, strong and bitter, and tried to ignore the fact that the fridge door was closed when I left it open the night before. Patrice called, saying she'd baked blueberry muffins and that I should stop by. I think she sensed my unraveling. Her voice had that careful tone you use with someone teetering near a ledge. I went because being alone in the house felt unbearable. Her kitchen smelled safe, normal, like cinnamon and warm butter. She poured me coffee and looked at me with those sharp church lady eyes. "You're pale, Danielle," she said, "like you've been up all night." I lied and told her I'd just been stressed from the sale. She nodded but didn't believe me. After a silence too long to be comfortable, she said, "You know, some folks say you have to be careful what you sell. Not everything belongs in the open air. Some things you keep shut away." It struck me as strange, almost rehearsed, like she'd been waiting to say it. I asked what she meant, but she only pressed her lips together and shook her head. "Never mind," she muttered, sliding the plate of muffins closer. When I left, her words clung to me like damp cloth. Back home, I found the VHS tapes stacked neatly on my coffee table. I hadn't brought them in. My hands went cold. I stood there staring until the TV clicked on by itself with a low buzz. The blue screen brightened, then static, then a grainy image bled through. It was my father. He was younger, hair dark, pacing in his old office, the one above the auto shop before it failed. He slammed a phone down. The camera angle was wrong, like someone had set it in the corner without his knowing. He shouted at someone I couldn't see. His voice garbled through static, but his anger sharp, almost feral. The tape cut to another scene. My mother crying at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a fan of knives. And then, worst of all, a shot of me, barely 12 years old, standing in the hallway, clutching the doorframe, watching them. My face pale, wet with tears I hadn't remembered shedding. The TV hissed and words scraped across the audio track. "You sold the wrong things." I ripped the cord from the wall. The screen didn't go dark immediately. It faded like it resisted. I wanted to throw the tapes out, burn them, anything. But when I gathered them up, the labels, blank before, now bore words scrawled in my father's handwriting. Loss, debt, failure. I dropped them. Trembling. The mirror came next. I had shoved it into the garage with every intention of hauling it to Goodwill. But that night it was leaning against the hallway wall outside my bedroom. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. In its reflection, my room glowed red, not in reality, but in the glass. Behind me stood my father, shoulders slumped, face blackened with ash. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. When I spun around, no one was there, but the reflection still showed him. I covered the mirror with an old blanket. A moment later, I heard the sound of fabric sliding. When I looked again, the blanket was on the floor, neatly folded. I didn't sleep. Eli came the next day. He'd been worried after I canceled dinner with him. He walked through the house, sniffed the air, frowned. "Smells like chemicals in here," he said. "Like cologne or cleaner?" I told him everything, words tumbling over each other. The tapes, the mirror, the man in the gray suit. He tried to stay calm, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "You need sleep," he said. "You're not thinking straight. Let me crash here tonight, okay?" I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted him to stay. But something inside me twisted, a voice that wasn't mine. "Don't drag him into this." So I forced a smile and said, "I'll be fine." He hesitated, then hugged me hard, whispering, "Call me if anything happens, anything." When the door shut behind him, I felt abandoned. That night, the house came alive. The TV clicked on again, but this time no VHS was in the player. Instead, static formed into letters pulsing, "Debt never leaves." From the kitchen came the sound of glass scraping across wood. I froze. It continued, slow and deliberate, like someone was pushing a bottle across the counter. My stomach dropped. I knew that sound. When I dared to look, there it was. My father's old cologne bottle, the one that had sat on his dresser until the day he died. I hadn't seen it in years. It scraped inch by inch until it stood upright at the counter's edge. The sharp scent filled the air. Not faint, not imagined. Thick, stinging my nose, clawing at memory. I stumbled back, gagging. The fridge door creaked open on its own. Papers fluttered out, not bills but notes. Each one in my father's handwriting. Danielle. Don't sell me. Not for sale. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break free. The mirror in the hallway pulsed with light. In it I saw my father again, writing on the fridge, his face melting like wax. He turned, and though his mouth didn't move, his voice filled my head. "This is what you sold." I screamed and bolted. I grabbed my keys, ran barefoot to the car, and slammed the door shut behind me. My hand shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed to life. As I pulled out of the driveway, I risked a glance in the rear view. There he was. The man in the gray suit stood at the curb, one hand resting on the mirror that somehow leaned against my mailbox. His face was unreadable, smooth as stone, but then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted his hand and waved, not menacing. Not mocking, satisfied, like a buyer closing a deal. I drove into the night, the scent of my father's cologne filling the car no matter how wide I rolled down the windows. And now, even as I tell you this, I know I can't escape. If evil can be bought and sold, then I've already sold myself. So let me ask you, what's sitting in your garage waiting for you? I've always believed the hardest part of life is what people don't notice about you. The quiet things, the jobs no one thanks you for. The loneliness that hangs on like mildew, clinging to everything you touch. My name is Janine Mallory. I'm 32 years old, and I clean offices for a living. The kind of work people only care about when it isn't done. I used to tell myself that was fine, that invisible work was still honest work. But lately every mop stroke feels heavier, as if I'm scrubbing at mistakes I can't undo. That Saturday, September 6, 2014, I was driving home after a long morning shift at Riverside Insurance, 1180 Broad Street, Augusta, Georgia. The heat shimmered off the blacktop in waves, blurring the world until it looked like it was underwater. Cicadas screamed in the trees, a wall of sound so steady it almost numbed me. That's when I saw the sign. Yard sale today, 1 block east. It was nailed crooked to a telephone pole, red paint dripping in uneven letters. I almost didn't turn. Yard sales were for people with lighter lives, people with time to browse trinkets and laugh over chipped teacups. I didn't belong to that world, but the sign's red seemed to pull me. I turned. The street was quiet, shaded by big oaks whose branches sagged heavy in the heat. The air smelled faintly of asphalt and cut grass. Outside a low ranch house sat 2 folding tables of objects, tarnished candlesticks, dolls with cracked porcelain faces, stacks of picture frames. No one stood behind them. Just silence thick as syrup. I was about to back away when a voice startled me. Looking for something special? I turned. A woman stood near the porch, maybe mid-40s. Careful lipstick, tired eyes. She introduced herself as Mrs. Elkin. Her teenage son hovered behind her, pale and watchful, his hands stuffed into his pockets. They smiled, spoke kindly. But their questions pressed too close. Where did I live? Did I live alone? Did I work nights? I laughed lightly, offered polite half-answers. My stomach had already begun to tighten. Then I saw it. At the edge of the table in a cheap wooden frame sat a sheet of yellowed paper. Across it, written in dark ink, was a single word, Janine, my name, and the handwriting. It was my father's. My father, who had been dead for 10 years, my throat locked. I stared, unable to move. Mrs. Elkin's smile widened just slightly, as if she'd been waiting for me to notice. The cicadas went silent. Her son whispered something I couldn't catch. The yard seemed to stretch deeper, wrong somehow. The driveway longer, the road blurred by heat. My chest knotted. I mumbled that I should go, but Mrs. Elkin stepped closer, blocking me. Her son circled behind. I ran, shoved past them, my breath burning, their voices chasing me. You can't leave yet, you came for this. I barely reached my car. My hand slipped on the wheel as I gunned the engine. In the rearview mirror, the tables were gone. Just bare grass. And 2 dark figures watching. That night, a box sat on my porch. Inside was the frame. The one with my name, and a note. You belong here now. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the yard stretching too long, the figures standing silent. I woke again and again, slick with sweat, convinced the cicadas outside my apartment window had gone quiet, and in that silence I could hear breathing. The next morning, I carried the box inside. I don't know why. I should have thrown it in the dumpster, or better yet, left it where it sat. But there's something about seeing your own name written in a dead man's hand. You can't ignore it. I set the frame on my kitchen counter, told myself I'd burn it later. Work didn't feel real that day. The fluorescent lights at Riverside Insurance hummed louder than usual. The chemical tang of the cleaning supplies stung my nose. Every desk I wiped felt sticky. Every trash can I emptied seemed heavier. And the whole time I kept glancing at doorways, convinced someone was standing just out of sight. On my break, I called my mother. I don't even know why. She and I don't talk much anymore. Too many old wounds. Mom, I said, do you still have any of Dad's things? There was a pause. What do you mean? Like his handwriting, notes, letters, another pause. Why? I almost told her. About the yard sale, about the frame. But the words lodged in my throat. How do you tell someone that their dead husband's hand has reached across 10 years to scratch your name onto a piece of paper? Sold on a stranger's lawn. I just wondered, I said. Her tone shifted, tight, guarded. You shouldn't stir that up, Janine. Leave the past where it is. She hung up before I could answer. That conversation gnawed at me. My mother had always been evasive when it came to my father, but this felt different. Like she knew something. That night, unable to stop myself, I called her again. Mom, I need to ask you something. A sigh. You sound tired. I saw Dad's handwriting. On something. Something new. Silence stretched. Then softly. What did it say? My throat worked. It said my name. Her voice broke just slightly. Oh, Janine, what? What does that mean? Another pause, heavier this time. Then, when you were little, your father used to leave you notes. Just the one word, Janine. He said it was your anchor, that if you ever got lost or scared, you'd see your name in his hand and know you were safe. It was your thing. Yours and his. Nobody else knew. My breath hitched. So how could anyone else? Don't talk about this, she cut in sharply. Don't ever mention it again. Mom, but the line clicked dead. I sat there in the dim glow of my kitchen, staring at the frame on the counter. My father's handwriting. Our secret, and someone else had it. The days blurred after that. Small things kept happening, the kind you try to explain away. One evening I came home and found the frame moved from the counter to my dresser. I lived alone. Another night I woke at 3:12 a.m. to the cicadas falling silent. And in that thick hush, I swear I heard Mrs. Elkin whisper my name. Once, scrubbing the men's bathroom at work, I looked up and saw handwriting on the mirror, traced in condensation though the glass was dry. 4 words, you belong here now. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed a rag, scrubbed the words until the glass squealed. When I finally stopped, my reflection looked warped, like I was staring at someone else. But worse was what happened as I turned to leave. A coworker, Sandra from the claims department, pushed the door open. She frowned at the glass. Why'd someone write on the mirror? I froze. You see it? Yeah, some words, weird. She squinted, reading. You belong here now. Who wrote that? My pulse spiked. I don't know. She gave me a look I couldn't read, then shrugged, shaking her head, and walked out. I spun back to the mirror. It was blank. Perfectly clean. That was the first time I realized it wasn't just in my head. Other people could see it sometimes. The thought didn't comfort me. It terrified me, because it meant the thing following me wasn't just a private madness. It was real and it wanted me. Sandra never mentioned the mirror again. The next morning, when I caught her by the vending machines, I tried. About yesterday, I said, forcing casualness into my voice. In the bathroom. She blinked at me. What bathroom? The men's bathroom. The words on the mirror. You said. Her smile was polite, blank. Janine, I think you're working too hard. I don't know what you mean. And she walked away. I stood there clutching my soda can until the aluminum dented under my fingers. My chest felt hollow, like air was leaking out of me. She had seen it. I knew she had. I remembered the way she squinted, lips moving as she read. I remembered the shape of her frown, but now, nothing. That night, the cicadas outside my apartment sang so loud I wanted to claw my ears shut. When they stopped, the silence dropped like a blade. That was when I saw him. The boy. He stood under the sodium yellow glow of the parking lot lamp. Hands in his pockets, his pale face turned up toward my window. I dropped the blinds, heart pounding. Later, when I went down to check my mailbox, Mrs. Ortega, the woman from 2 doors down, was dragging her trash bin to the curb. She caught my arm. You should tell your nephew not to lurk out there so late, she said. I stared at her. My what? Your nephew. The pale boy. He was standing under the light. Nearly gave me a heart attack. My mouth went dry. He's not my nephew. Her brows furrowed. Well, he looked like he was waiting for you. I couldn't breathe. Did you see where he went? But she was already shaking her head, muttering about kids these days and turning away. The next morning, when I knocked on her door to ask again, she looked confused. What boy? She asked. The one you saw last night, I pressed. Under the light, her lips tightened. I never said anything like that. Are you feeling all right, Janine? She shut the door gently as though I were fragile glass. That's when I started locking the frame away. I stuffed it under sweaters in the back of my closet, jammed a chair against the door. It didn't matter. Each morning it was back on the dresser. The handwriting changed too. New words appeared, ink dark and wet-looking. Come back, we're waiting. Once, the words filled the entire page over and over. My name written in my father's looping hand until it blurred together into a dense, suffocating black mass. I burned that page in the sink. But when I turned back to the frame, the paper was whole again. I started seeing them in places that made no sense. At Riverside, in the reflection of polished floors, I'd catch glimpses of Mrs. Elkin's careful lipstick smile. In the stairwell glass, the pale boy's eyes watching. Even my work betrayed me. One evening, alone on the 11th floor, I was buffing the tiles. The machine hummed beneath my hands, the smell of wax rising sharp and chemical. My reflection followed me across the shining floor. And then, so help me, I saw a second set of footprints appear behind mine. Bare feet, damp, pressing into the wax as though someone walked just out of reach. I turned so fast the machine screeched across the tiles, but the hallway was empty. When I looked down again, the footprints were gone. Sleep left me. Hunger, too. My body grew jittery, twitchy, my thoughts looping like a skipping record. I tried calling my mother again. She didn't answer. I drove to her house on a Sunday afternoon just to see her face, to make her explain what she meant about the notes. She answered the door in her robe, frowning. "Janine, you look sick. Tell me about the notes," I said. My voice shook. "Tell me why Dad always wrote my name. Tell me why someone else has it now." Her hands trembled on the doorknob. For a moment, I thought she would slam the door in my face. Instead, she whispered, "Your father wasn't well. Sometimes he wrote your name when he was frightened. He thought writing it anchored him, kept him from slipping away. He made you his anchor, too." Tears stung my eyes. "But that was just us. Just me and him." Her expression hardened. "Exactly. Which is why no one else could possibly have it. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "So you're inviting something in, Janine? By giving it attention, by looking at it. Stop feeding it. Stop thinking about it." I wanted to scream. How could I stop thinking about it when it was all I saw, all I smelled, all I heard? But my mother's eyes glistened with a different fear. Not of the haunting. Of me. She shut the door. This time, she didn't open it again. After that, I stopped reaching out. The haunting grew louder. Each night, when the cicadas fell silent, I heard noises in my apartment. Not just footsteps anymore. Something worse. The rhythmic squeak of rubber soles on tile. My shoes. My work shoes. The sound was unmistakable. The faint, high-pitched drag they made when the floors were freshly mopped. A sound I'd lived with for years. A sound that belonged to me. Only now it came from the darkened hall outside my bedroom, slow and deliberate, circling. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. I would lie rigid in bed, breath held, heart battering my ribs. Once I forced myself to look. The hallway was empty, but the sound went on, as if invisible feet paced in my shoes. By dawn, when the cicadas began again, the noises stopped, and the frame was always waiting. I don't know how long I can hold out, my co-workers whisper. My neighbors avoid me. Even my mother won't answer the phone. The shadows in this place are crowded now, pressing at me from the corners. Every silence feels like a held breath. The other night, I woke to find the frame lying on the pillow beside me. The glass cracked down the middle like a wound. Written across the paper in my father's looping hand were two words: "It's time." The cicadas were silent, and from the kitchen came the squeak of my shoes on the tile. "Closer, closer. Looking for something special?" whispered Mrs. Elkin, her voice brushing the inside of my skull. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Because I think if I do, if I get up, if I follow the sound, I'll find out what I came for. And I don't know if I'll ever come back. I was 19 the summer I worked at Pine Haven Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, 401 East 13th Avenue, Eugene, Oregon. The place clung to me before I even walked through its doors. You could smell it from the parking lot. Bleach and boiled peas, metal and mildew, something sharp and sour that pressed itself into the back of your throat until you tasted it hours later. I didn't want to be there. I never did. But art school wasn't going to pay for itself, and my mom had made it clear. If I wanted to live under her roof, I had to start contributing. I told myself it was temporary. A summer job, a paycheck until something better came along. But even on the first day, standing in that fluorescent hallway with a stack of towels under my arm, I felt like I'd stumbled into something sticky I wouldn't be able to wash off. The building was 3 floors. Low ceilings, buzzing lights that hummed like hornets. Wheelchairs lined the halls. Patients sat with blank eyes staring past me, or they cried for reasons I couldn't understand. Sometimes they shouted words that made no sense, slurred fragments of lives they couldn't quite touch anymore. I wiped down rooms, pushed carts of laundry that smelled of urine and Lysol, and tried not to meet their eyes. Because when I did, it always felt like they knew something I didn't. Something waiting at the end of the hall. That was July 5th, 2002. The day after fireworks, the air heavy and wet, Oregon's rare attempt at humidity making everything stick. The windows fogged faintly inside. My uniform clung to my back with sweat. I stood in the break room, scrubbing my hands at the sink long after the soap was gone, watching suds melt down the drain as if they could carry my dread with them. Carla leaned against the doorway, hip cocked, hair dyed a red so brassy it gleamed orange under the lights. 21, always with a cigarette tucked behind her ear, and a laugh that sounded like she'd swallowed gravel. She squinted at me, her smudged eyeliner making her look perpetually tired. "You're wound too tight, girl. What you need is a distraction." I looked at her. "What kind of distraction?" "There's a yard sale across the street. Old couple's house. They're moving out." She lifted her brows, a sly smile. "Real antiques. Maybe you'll find something worth more than the $3 an hour they're paying us." Before I could answer, James wandered in. James was 24, orderly, tall with shaggy hair he never bothered brushing, a smirk that made me want to smack it off his face. He heard just enough to join in. Or maybe Mia will finally find a life worth living over there. He grinned, teeth flashing. I forced a laugh. It came out thin. That was what I did back then, forced things. Forced smiles, forced politeness. Forced myself out of bed when all I wanted was to let the sheets swallow me whole. When my 10-minute break rolled around, I should have gone out back, lit one of Carla's cigarettes, maybe called my mom and let her nag me about tuition again. Instead, curiosity tugged at me. Or maybe it wasn't curiosity. Maybe it was something else. The sun outside was bright, too bright. My eyes ached crossing the lot, the heat rising from asphalt in shimmering waves. The house sat across the street, a squat single story with a patchy lawn that looked more dirt than grass. The yard sale sprawled across the yard like the house had coughed up everything inside it. Tables sagged under mismatched plates, chipped mugs, rusted tools. Blankets on the ground held piles of VHS tapes with handwritten labels curling off. Dolls, dozens of them, porcelain faces cracked like spider webs, glass eyes catching the sun in dead glints. A box of old photographs sat open, edges curling, the faint smell of mildew rising like a ghost. A thin man in suspenders stood near the porch. He didn't greet me, didn't even nod. Just hovered, his face slack, eyes fixed on me as if I'd already done something wrong. The air shifted, heavy, charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm, when the world holds its breath. But the sky was cloudless. I crouched near a table stacked with trinkets and picked up a jewelry box. Wood chipped, paint flaking. The hinges rusted enough to squeal when I pried it open. Inside was a single folded slip of paper. My name was written on it. Mia. My chest tightened. The world bent in, muffled. From across the street, Carla's voice carried. "You find something?" But it sounded wrong. Hollow, distant, like her words had to swim through water to reach me. The man in suspenders smiled. Too wide, too many teeth. His lips barely moved, but I heard him clear his thought. "You've been expected." I dropped the box. It hit the grass without sound. My legs jolted into motion, but the ground clung like mud. The driveway stretched out impossibly long, each step heavier than the last, like the earth wanted to swallow me whole. When I finally burst back into the fluorescent hallway of Pine Haven, sweat slicked down my back. James was leaning against the wall. He cocked his head. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I told myself I imagined it. Stress, heat, lack of sleep. Easy excuses. But that night, when I hauled laundry to the basement, the cart rattling in front of me, I saw it. The jewelry box, sitting neatly on top of the whites. I froze. My hands went numb on the cart handle. It couldn't be the same box. It was impossible. But the chipped paint, the rusted hinges, it was. I lifted the lid with shaking fingers. Another folded slip of paper, it read, "I know what he did to you." My stomach pitched. I shoved it closed and buried it under sheets, heart hammering. No one could know. I'd never told anyone. Not Carla, not James, not even my mom. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, I opened the supply closet looking for gloves. The box sat on the top shelf, waiting like it knew I'd look up. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. This one said the pills. I counted them. I pressed my back to the wall, breath shallow. No one had seen. I'd been so careful. The third time was worse. I came into the staff room ready to collapse after 12 hours on my feet. The thin couch against the wall looked like salvation, until I saw it. The box, on my pillow. The slip of paper read a thought so black I'd never spoken it. Not to anyone. Barely even to myself. Sometimes I wish I'd never been born. My knees buckled. I had to sit before I collapsed. My pulse skittered out of rhythm, the world dimming at the edges. I should have told someone. But who? Carla would laugh. James would twist it into a joke. Management would say I was overtired. My mom would blame art school, call it attention-seeking. And even if they believed me, what then? How do you explain a box that follows you? Instead, I started avoiding sleep. Avoiding rooms where I might be alone. Avoiding mirrors too, because sometimes, just for a blink, I thought I saw a man in suspenders standing behind me. Nights stretched. Dreams blurred. In them, I was always in that driveway, running and never reaching the road. The man's smile split wider each time. His voice slithered through the air, expected, and every morning my hand stung with thin, burning cuts. Paper cuts. One evening, as I dragged a mop down the hallway, one of the patients reached out. Mrs. Duncan. She was 87, hair wisps like cotton, eyes usually glazed with dementia. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, her nails dug in. "Don't open it," she whispered. Her breath reeked sour-sweet. Her eyes focused sharp for the first time since I'd known her. "Don't read the last one," my throat locked. "What?" Her grip loosened. The fog returned to her gaze. She blinked, muttered about a daughter who hadn't visited in months, and let me go. I stood frozen in the hallway, mop dripping, the air suddenly colder. That night, the jewelry box wasn't waiting in the staff room, or the supply closet, or the laundry. It was on my nightstand, at home. The jewelry box sat on my nightstand like it had always been there. I couldn't remember placing it down, couldn't remember carrying it from the yard sale to my car or from my car to my room. I had no memory of setting it beside my lamp, and yet there it was, framed in the soft yellow glow, its varnished wood glimmering faintly, its brass latch shut tight like a mouth pressed against a secret. My first instinct was to blame myself. I must have brought it home in a kind of fog. People do things absent-mindedly all the time. Check their pockets and find keys they don't remember putting there. Take sips of water and forget they drank. But something about the sight of it made my chest hollow out. It felt wrong, like waking up to find a stranger sitting at the foot of your bed. I told myself it was just an object, piece of wood, a box. But when I lifted it, it was heavier than I expected, the weight shifting slightly as though something inside had moved. My thumb hovered over the latch. I wanted to snap it open, prove to myself it was empty, prove to myself I wasn't the kind of girl who lost her mind over a trinket. But my stomach knotted and I set it back down without opening it. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I rolled over, I swore I could hear the faintest creak as though wood strained against itself. Once I thought I heard a soft click, like a latch slipping open, but when I jerked upright, the box was closed, perfectly still. I tried to shove it into my closet behind a pile of laundry, but no matter how far I pushed it back, I felt it humming in the dark, radiating like a splinter beneath skin. The next morning, I woke to find the box on the nightstand again. My closet door was ajar, the laundry pile scattered slightly, as if someone had rummaged through it in the night. I didn't scream, didn't even move. I just stared until my throat went dry, until I could taste the sourness of my own morning breath like it was proof I was still alive. I was supposed to meet Carla for breakfast, but I canceled. I said I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. The thought of leaving the box alone in my room terrified me almost as much as taking it with me. So I sat with it, hours melting like wax, unable to focus on anything else. At some point, against my own will, I opened it. Inside was a tiny folded scrap of paper. The handwriting was small, jagged, rushed. Just one sentence: "You've always known it would find you." I dropped the box. The paper fluttered against my bedsheet like a moth. I waited for the words to change, to rearrange themselves into something rational, something that could be explained. But they didn't. I shoved the paper back in, slammed the lid shut, and ran to the kitchen to splash water on my face. I told myself I must have overlooked it before, that it had been there since the yard sale. Maybe some kid had scribbled it as a prank. Maybe it wasn't meant for me. But then the phone rang. When I picked it up, silence stretched on the other end, heavy and deliberate. I could hear breathing. My skin prickled and I hung up. The phone rang again, and when I finally pulled it from the wall, the quiet of the house felt worse that night. I dreamed of Pine Haven. The wide gravel path, the rusted swings, the shadows stretching long in the late afternoon sun. Except in the dream, the place was darker, emptied of sky, like the world had folded in on itself. I saw the jewelry box sitting on the ground, lid open. From inside, whispers rose, dozens of voices tangled together. I reached down to shut it, but when I touched the wood, it felt like skin. Warm, pulsing, alive. I woke to my lamp flickering. The jewelry box was open. The scrap of paper was gone. For days I tried to outsmart it. I locked it in my desk drawer. I buried it in a plastic bag beneath the azalea bushes out back. I even drove 10 miles out to the river and hurled it into the current, watching it bob and tumble, carried away. But the next morning it was always there on the nightstand, closed tight, waiting for me. The messages grew stranger. Sometimes there were new scraps of paper inside, each with scrawled words that seemed to come from nowhere, from no one. You can't hide it forever. They will see what you've done. Open wider. Other times the box would be empty, but I'd wake to words carved faintly into the wood grain itself, like scratches left by fingernails. My name, my address, a date from years ago I didn't want to remember. I stopped answering Carla's calls, stopped showing up for shifts at the bookstore. My world shrank to the size of my bedroom, me and the box in an endless standoff. My mother asked what was wrong during one of her check-in calls, and I lied through my teeth, telling her classes were fine, work was fine, I was fine. Because how could I explain that an object was dismantling me piece by piece? When I finally broke down and told Carla, she came over in person. She barged through my door with a grocery bag of takeout and her stubborn determination. "Mia, you look like hell," she said, setting the bag on my desk. "You've been ghosting me for a week. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, to show her the box and watch her face twist with recognition, proof I wasn't imagining it. But when I pointed to the nightstand, it was gone. The lamp, the stack of books, the glass of half-drunk water, they were all there. But the jewelry box had vanished. Carla frowned. "What am I supposed to be looking at?" I stammered, clawing at the empty space. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. She touched my shoulder. "You need sleep. And probably food. Let's eat, okay?" I nodded, but when I sat down at the desk, my heart thudded in my throat. Inside the grocery bag, nestled between cartons of lo mein and sesame chicken, was the jewelry box. Carla didn't see it. She reached in, pulled out noodles, and handed me chopsticks. I forced myself to look casual, but my hands shook so badly the chopsticks clattered onto the floor. She gave me a puzzled look but said nothing. That night after she left, I opened the box again. Another scrap of paper, this one stained with something brown and brittle. The words were almost illegible, smeared, but I could still make them out. "Tell them, or I will." The date carved into the wood matched that night exactly. From then on, the whispers followed me everywhere. Not out loud, not something anyone else could hear, but tucked against the edges of my thoughts. I'd be in the shower, steam rising around me, and suddenly the rush of water would twist into murmurs. At the grocery store, I'd reach for a carton of milk, and for a heartbeat the label would shift, letters rearranging into words only I could see. Confess. The jewelry box was no longer confined to my room. I'd glimpse it reflected in windows, sitting behind me even when I was miles from home. Once I swore I saw it perched on the passenger seat of my car while I drove, though when I looked again, the seat was empty. Sleep became impossible. Food tasted like dust. My skin itched constantly, as though invisible hands tugged at me. I was unraveling, and the box knew it. The final night came without warning. I was in bed, clutching my pillow to my chest like a shield, when I heard the latch click open. I didn't move, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, but I knew. I knew the box was opening on its own. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, pressing into me from all sides. Finally, I turned my head. The jewelry box was open wide. Inside wasn't paper this time, but a reflection, my own face staring back at me, except it wasn't me. My eyes were hollow, my mouth twisted into a grin I couldn't make. My reflection leaned closer, lips moving. "Say it," it mouthed. "Say what you did." I tried to scream, but no sound came. The reflection reached out of the box, fingers stretching impossibly far, brushing against my wrist. The touch was ice, burning through my veins, and then I remembered the date. The date carved into the wood. The date scrawled across scraps of paper. The date that belonged to a night I had buried so deep I thought it would never surface. A night in high school. A party, too much to drink. A friend who never made it home. The truth hit me like a blade. The box wasn't haunting me. It was remembering for me. When I blinked, the room was empty. The box was shut. The whispers had gone still, but I knew better. It was waiting for me to open it again, and the worst part was I knew I would. I was 27 when the fog first followed me home, and I've never shaken it loose. My name is Leah Carver, and in the fall of 2016, I lived alone on the west side of Lexington, Kentucky, in a narrow rental house that smelled faintly of mildew no matter how hard I scrubbed. I worked nights at the Cedar Point Laundromat, 1149 Willow Creek Drive, the kind of place where the hum of dryers became a lullaby if you let it. Most nights I was the only one there after 10, mopping up detergent spills, folding strangers' underwear, feeding quarters into machines when the bills got stuck. I used to tell myself it was honest work, a steady paycheck, but really it was a hiding place, a fluorescent cocoon where I didn't have to admit my marriage had ended, or that most of the furniture in my house still bore the ghost of my ex-husband's hands. The idea of a yard sale came to me like a dare. Get rid of the past in one sweep, I thought. Strip it out onto folding tables, let strangers paw through it, and pocket enough crumpled cash to feel lighter. I picked Friday, October 14th, a date that seemed harmless. Autumn had just started to rot the trees, and the air clung damp against my skin. That morning, fog pressed so low the streetlights never really switched off, bathing the neighborhood in a bruised yellow glow. I dragged chairs and boxes onto the lawn, each one heavier than it looked. A stack of records. Lamps we bought the year we pretended we liked each other. Kitchenware I hadn't touched since. Every piece I set down felt like arranging my own wake. My neighbor, Mr. Dobbs, a retiree with more time than teeth, shuffled over holding a battered thermos. He squinted at the rows of my past lined up on the grass and said, "Looks like a funeral out here, Leah." He wasn't wrong. By 9:30, the first browsers arrived. A mother with twin boys who only wanted to play with the toaster. A college kid with earbuds shoved so deep he didn't hear me call out prices. Strangers' hands reached over my memories like they were nothing more than cheap bargains. I forced a smile, scribbling down bills in a notebook as if it would steady me. That's when I saw her. She looked no older than 16, barefoot, hair hanging dark and wet against her cheeks, though the sky hadn't rained. She stepped up the driveway with the quiet assurance of someone who'd been there before. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft as a lullaby. "Are these your things? Or mine?" I laughed, nervous. "They're for sale, if that's what you mean." But she didn't answer. She drifted toward the back table, where I'd laid out smaller items. Photographs, trinkets, folded towels from the laundromat I'd meant to return. Carly, my co-worker, had promised to swing by and help. She pulled up just as the girl leaned over the towels. "Creepy fog," Carly muttered, stepping out of her car. She was younger than me by 2 years, all blonde ponytail and chipped nail polish. She gave me a look that said, "You need a coffee," and headed toward the girl. But when she reached the table, the girl was gone. Not walking away, not ducking behind a car, gone. Only a trail of water remained, beating down the concrete in a line that led nowhere. Carly frowned. "Did she just—" "I don't know," I said too quickly. My skin prickled with a sudden, inexplicable cold. We tried to shake it off, but the yard seemed to shift after that. Items began vanishing from the tables. At first, I blamed sloppy keeping. Maybe I hadn't noticed someone paying, maybe a thief slipped by. But the missing pieces cut deep. A framed photo of me at 20, grinning on a beach I couldn't name anymore. A stack of towels I'd swiped from the laundromat thinking no one would notice. A porcelain doll my mother left when she moved out. its eyes a shade too glossy to meet head-on, each gone without a trace. By noon, the air reeked, not of burgers from someone's grill or gasoline from passing cars, but of bleach and whetstone, the stench that clung to my laundromat nights. Carly rubbed her arms, muttering that it felt colder than October should. I wanted to agree, but my tongue felt heavy, like something was holding it down. Then came the voice, everywhere at once, as if the fog itself spoke. "You can't sell what belongs to me." Carly froze. Her eyes darted to the table where the porcelain doll had sat. She bent down, trembling, and I saw her lips move soundlessly before she screamed. She held the doll upside down. Its porcelain head gleamed under the dim sun, and carved into the underside, fresh and sharp as if done that moment, was my name, Leah. I dropped the notebook. My chest bucked against itself. The fog surged thicker, coiling like smoke around the tables. I ran, crashing through chairs, knocking over boxes, into the house, slamming the door behind me. But the fog didn't stop. It rolled inside, under the doorframe, through the cracks in the windows, swallowing the hallway. I tried to find the bedroom, but the walls had dissolved into haze. Shapes flickered at the edges, hands pale and wet, gripping my arms, pulling me backward. My lungs filled with bleach. Whispers crowded my ears, hissing about debts I'd forgotten. I clawed toward the laundry basket at the end of the hall, as if it were a lifeboat. The whispers tightened, circling. "You wore what was mine. You washed what was mine. You sold what was mine." A final pull and I was gone. When I opened my eyes again, I was sprawled on the driveway, gravel biting into my cheek. The yard was bare, every single item gone. Tables empty, cloth stripped. Even the folding chairs had vanished as if swallowed whole. Mr. Dobbs stood across the street, his thermos dangling loose. He stared at me with wide, bloodshot eyes. His lips moved, whispering words I'll never unhear. "I saw you fold yourself into the laundry basket and vanish." He crossed himself and shuffled back inside, leaving me alone on the driveway, shaking in the fog. That was the day I stopped trusting my own eyes. The day I realized laundry never comes clean. Not really, because even now, years later, whenever I pass a laundromat, the smell of bleach clings to my skin and I hear her bare feet behind me, dripping on the tile. Her voice always comes soft, almost kind, almost mine. "Are these your things? Or mine?" I didn't quit the laundromat right away. I should have. Anyone sane would have packed up, found another job, maybe even left town. But I told myself what happened at the yard sale was exhaustion, nerves, leftover grief that found a shape. A barefoot girl, fog too thick to breathe, my name carved where it shouldn't be. Things my mind stitched together from fatigue and heartbreak. That's what I told myself. And if I repeated it enough, maybe I could make it true. Carly didn't come back after that day. I called her once, maybe twice, but her number rang dead. When I drove past her apartment, the blinds were drawn and her car sat in the same place for weeks. Mr. Dobbs refused to mention the yard sale again, though sometimes I'd catch him peeking at me from his porch, lips moving like he was praying. The house felt hollow, not just empty of furniture, but stripped of sound. I slept on a mattress on the floor. No lamps, no tables, no distractions. Every night I lay awake listening, for water dripping where it shouldn't, for footsteps on the tile, for the voice that had slipped into me like fog slips under a door. Still, I kept working my night shifts. Cedar Point Laundromat was a 24-hour place, fluorescent lights humming, vending machines groaning out sodas, dryers churning like distant engines. The first nights back, everything looked normal enough. People cycled through. Truckers, college kids, the same old woman who always washed at 2 a.m. because she claimed her house was haunted. I wanted to laugh at her then. I don't anymore. One Tuesday, just past midnight, I was scrubbing a stubborn rust stain out of the folding counter when I heard the door chime. I looked up. The door hadn't opened. Still, damp footprints stretched across the linoleum. Bare feet, small and narrow, glistening wet. They trailed past the washers, disappearing in the aisle by the vending machines. I froze, rag in hand. Hello, silence. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of water dripping. I followed against every instinct. The aisle was empty, just a hum of soda cans waiting to fall, but on the glass of the vending machine, letters streaked in condensation. Mine. My stomach dropped. I backed away, bumping into a dryer. Its door swung open on its own, the heat blasting my face. Inside wasn't laundry. Inside was dark, wet fog rolling slow as breath. I slammed it shut. My hands shook so hard I left streaks on the metal. For weeks after, small things kept disappearing from the laundromat. My notebook, a pair of rubber gloves, a customer's shirt before she could grab it. Each time I thought of the yard sale, of tables bare and my name inside porcelain. Each time I told myself I was tired, but the smell gave me away. Bleach and whetstone. Even when the machines ran fresh cycles, even when the air vents pumped out dry heat, that smell hung on me like a second skin. One night, near closing, Mr. Dobbs came in. I didn't even know he did his laundry there. He looked older under the fluorescent lights, bent and gray. He set down a basket, but instead of starting a load, he walked over to me. "Leah," he whispered, "what you brought into the street, don't think it stayed outside." I tried to laugh. "It was just a weird day, Mr. Dobbs." He leaned closer, eyes wet and sharp. "I saw you fold yourself into that basket." "Don't you lie to me. You didn't come back the same." I wanted to snap at him, tell him to keep his ghost stories, but my throat closed up and all I could smell was bleach. That night after he left, I locked the doors early. Sat behind the counter with my head in my hands. At some point I must have dozed. When I woke, the laundromat was filled with fog. Thick rolling, swallowing the neon open sign. Through it, a girl's silhouette stood, barefoot, hair dripping. She didn't move, only watched me. And though her lips never parted, her voice filled the place. "You wore what was mine. You washed what was mine. You tried to sell what was mine." I couldn't breathe. My chest seized, heart punching. I staggered toward the exit, fumbling the lock, but the door handle slicked wet beneath my palm. Slippery as river rock. The fog pressed closer, damp fingers brushing my arms, my neck. "Please," I whispered. "Take it back. Take everything." The girl tilted her head. Her eyes gleamed, too pale, too wide. "It's not things I want." The lights flickered out. When they came back, the laundromat was empty. Dry. Silent. My skin burned with cold water, though I'd never left my spot. I called in sick for 3 nights after that. But absence didn't save me. At home, the mattress smelled of bleach. The bathroom mirror fogged even when I hadn't showered. And in the silence, her lullaby voice followed. "Are these your things? Or mine?" By the time I returned to work, Carly was there. She wasn't on the schedule, but she stood behind the counter as if she'd always been. Her ponytail hung limp, soaked. Her shirt clung damp against her ribs. "Where have you been?" I asked, throat tight. She smiled, slow, unnatural. "Helping her, folding what's hers." And then she turned, and I saw the carving at the base of her neck. My name. I ran. I don't know how long. Only that when I stopped, I was blocks away, the fog clinging to my clothes. My chest hurt. My feet ached. But in my pocket, I found something I hadn't put there. A folded towel, damp, stained, from the laundromat. I dropped it in the gutter. But even now, years later, I still feel its weight in my hand. I moved houses. I quit the laundromat. I even tried leaving Lexington, but the fog always found me. At bus stops, in hotel bathrooms. Once even on a flight when the cabin air turned heavy and wet. And always, the same soft question, following me closer than my own shadow. "Are these your things, or mine?" I don't know the answer anymore. Maybe they were never mine. Maybe I was hers all along. The first thing I remember about that July is the weight of the air. Heavy as wet wool pressed against my chest, thick enough that every breath felt reluctant. Eerie summers had always been muggy, but 2022 was cruel in a way that made people snap at one another in grocery store lines and drove dogs to howl late at night. The whole town seemed swollen with heat, restless and faintly sour, like milk left too long on the counter. I was 28, broke, and more restless than I wanted to admit. My art degree had gone stale in my hands, a half-rotten promise. The student loans never stopped collecting, and the loneliness, God, the loneliness gnawed harder than hunger. That's how I ended up at Dixon Clean & Care, scrubbing the ghosts of other people's lives out of houses. Temporary, I told myself. Temporary until I found the right studio, the right gallery, the right version of me that I used to believe in. Except weeks blurred into months, then into an entire year of rubber gloves, bleach fumes, and secondhand grief. The job that changed everything came on July 14th, 2022, a Friday soaked with cicada hum. My manager, who chain-smoked menthols in the office doorway, handed me the slip. Estate job. Widow cleaning out. Yard sale tomorrow, she said, voice rasping like old fabric. Polish dust box clutter. Easy work. Her hand hovered an instant too long on the paper, though, and her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I didn't realize how much that pause mattered until later. The address was 1940 Parkwood Avenue, East Side. I drove out with the windows rolled down, hoping to stir air thick as soup. The house looked unremarkable. Brick ranch, sagging gutters, porch steps furred with weeds. The garage door stood yawning open, spilling mildew into the heat. But what froze me was the driveway. Tables already set up. Rows of objects under the sun like the sale had already begun. I slowed, heartbeat skittering. My eyes snagged on a chipped mixing bowl, pale blue. My grandmother had owned the same one. Next to it sat a denim jacket with a crooked peace sign patch stitched on the sleeve. My stitch, my sloppy teenage sewing. And then at the edge of the table, a sketchbook. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. Charcoal faces stared up. My lines, my hesitant shading, the half-finished experiments I'd abandoned years ago. The book trembled in my hands. I shut it too fast, like it could bite. Inside, the air was worse. Close and damp, tinged with old paper and the sweetness of something gone bad. Mrs. Lyle, the widow, met me in the living room. Thin, gray-eyed, hair tucked into a neat twist, she wore a floral blouse that looked pressed but decades out of step. "You'll help me set prices, won't you, dear?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed like someone reading from a well-worn script. A man appeared behind her. Tall, maybe my age, with tired eyes and dark stubble. She introduced him as her nephew. She didn't give a name. He leaned close, so close I felt his breath along my cheek. Funny how things find their way home. The words made no sense, but the way he said them, low and certain, made something shift inside me like a loose floorboard. The day dragged. Silence pressed in, broken only by the scrape of drawers and the dull thud of boxes filling. I dusted, stacked, labeled, trying to ignore how the house seemed to breathe around me. But the objects wouldn't leave me alone. A bundle of letters written in my handwriting, though the dates and addresses weren't mine. Polaroids of me in college, me as a child, posed in ways I didn't remember. A rusted hammer I knew had once hung on my father's shed wall. I told myself it was coincidence, that we all see echoes of ourselves in other people's things. But my hands shook, betraying me. The nephew passed by once, carrying a box. He saw me frozen with an old stuffed bear in my hand, the same torn ear my childhood bear had. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, and smiled as though the line was rehearsed. By dusk, the air inside felt unbearable, pressing against my skin, seeping into my lungs. I heard faint noises from outside, the scrape of movement across asphalt. When I stepped into the driveway, I nearly screamed. The tables had shifted. Items rearranged, stacked differently, dragged inches across the concrete. A stack of records straightened itself, tilting and sliding with no hands near them. From the kitchen window behind me, Mrs. Lyle's voice floated out. "Don't leave yet, Clara, we haven't priced you." Something inside me snapped. I ran. Through the garage, stumbling over boxes that seemed to slide into my path. Out into the night, lungs burning with heat and panic. Behind me, a laugh, his laugh, too close, though I couldn't see him. At my car, I fumbled with the keys, yanked the door open, then froze. Every item I'd seen that day, every too familiar scrap was stacked neatly across my back seat. I quit the next morning. My manager didn't ask why, but it didn't end there. Objects began to appear. At first, small things I could dismiss. A mug from my mother's old set on my counter. A sketch I'd torn up, reassembled in my desk drawer. But soon they multiplied. I tried throwing them away. They came back. I burned a stack of drawings once, watched them curl into black lace. 2 days later, the same stack waited on my coffee table untouched. Worse were the whispers. At night, lying awake, I'd hear his voice curling from the objects themselves. From the denim jacket hanging in my closet, from the bear propped on the chair. Funny how things find their way home. Sometimes I caught him in reflections. In the darkened window, his shape stood just behind mine. In the bathroom mirror, his tired eyes staring over my shoulder. Always gone when I turned. The objects carried his presence, and the presence carried weight. I lived inside it. The final blow came 3 months later. I woke to find a small box on my nightstand, one I hadn't seen since childhood. Inside lay a silver locket. I hadn't worn it since I was 12, but when I opened it, I froze. Inside was a photograph, me and a boy. He was maybe 10, hair dark, smile crooked. My memory clanged against itself. I had known this boy once. A neighbor's cousin, a friend of a friend, someone who had played in my backyard one summer. The nephew. It hit me like ice. The shared bear, the locket, the jacket patch, all ours. All his once and mine entwined. I remembered games, dares whispered under trees. A summer afternoon when he had slipped, fallen, cut his arm on my father's shed tools. I'd pressed my peace sign patch against the blood. We'd promised to keep it between us, and then nothing. I'd forgotten him. My memory had sealed him away like a bad sketch torn out of a book, until now. The haunting was never random. It wasn't a stranger's malice. It was a shared history clawing back to the surface. That night, the locket burned against my chest. I couldn't stop wearing it. Couldn't throw it away. The whispers grew sharper, more insistent. Not for sale yet. The words filled my apartment, leaking from vents, humming through floorboards. And then one evening, an envelope appeared on my kitchen table. Inside was a single photograph, me asleep. Taken in my own bed on the back in my handwriting, price tomorrow. I had a choice. If I kept the locket, if I accepted the past as mine and his together, I knew I'd be claimed. Pulled into that house, that sale, priced and tagged like an object. If I destroyed it, if I rejected it, something worse might happen. The laughter already echoed in my skull. What price do you pay when you cut away part of yourself? I stood with the locket in my hand, fire flickering in the sink, sweat rolling down my face. My chest ached with panic. The voice was everywhere now, layering over itself, overlapping, his and hers. Mrs. Lyle's and mine. Not for sale yet. Tomorrow. Home again. I don't remember what I chose. Sometimes I wake with the locket tight around my neck, the clasp digging into my skin. Sometimes I wake to find the silver melted in the sink, reformed by morning. But always, when I step into the kitchen, a table waits, objects lined in rows. My drawings, my clothes, my photographs, and on the far edge, empty space, a price tag dangling, waiting for me. The first sound I heard when I came back to Clearwater wasn't the gulls screaming above the bay, or the distant hum of traffic along Gulf to Bay Boulevard. It was silence, pressing in so thick and heavy it seemed to crawl into my ears and nest in my chest. I thought I had left noise behind when I packed my car and left Tampa. The fights, the slammed doors, the way my ex's voice rose in a pitch that set my teeth on edge, those were gone. I thought silence would be a relief. Instead, it became something else entirely. Silence has weight. It presses against the ribs, fills the empty corners of a room, makes you too aware of the ticking clock, the hum of a refrigerator, the way your own breathing stutters when you're trying not to cry. I was 24, raw from the kind of heartbreak you don't tell your family about because you don't want to hear. I told you so. My fiancé had walked out on me, or maybe I had walked out on him. The truth was slippery depending on the day, the mood, the glass of wine. What mattered was that I came back here to Clearwater, to a place that had always felt temporary. My aunt had left behind an apartment and the Palms Motel was hiring for cleaners. I took both. The Palms Motel was a squat, coral pink building that pretended it was more glamorous than it had ever been. Its neon sign sputtered against the night, half lit, buzzing like an insect that refused to die. Every day I scrubbed at other people's stains, scoured out the smells they left behind, drowned the air in bleach that never truly covered mildew. The guests were drifters, salesmen, addicts, couples trying to sneak away from their lives. I learned not to ask questions. By the time June rolled around, the heat was unbearable. Clearwater always carried salt in the air, but that week it was mixed with the sharp bite of a storm pressing down on the horizon. I clocked out of the motel around 4, sweat sticking to my skin, the sky the color of a healing bruise. I wasn't ready to go home yet. Going home meant more silence, more waiting, more staring at my own reflection in the microwave door. That was when I saw it, a yard sale. It sprawled across the lawn of an old bungalow on Keene Road, a place that looked abandoned except for the tables out front, the paint peeled from the siding, the windows clouded by blinds that had warped in the sun. The grass was high enough to hide snakes. The tables sagged with forgotten things. Chipped mugs, cracked toys, stacks of faded paperbacks curling in the humidity. The woman who stood behind them didn't look like she belonged to the house or to the world. She was pale in a way that made me think of hospital beds, her arms marked with bruises that had turned the sick colors of old fruit. She watched me walk up with eyes that didn't blink enough. "Take something home," she said, her voice brittle, splintering like thin ice. I meant only to glance, but her stare pinned me there. I picked up a porcelain clock, its face spiderwebbed with cracks, and a wicker chair, the kind you'd expect to find in a grandmother's sunroom. Both smelled faintly of mildew and old perfume. I handed her the cash. She leaned in, close enough for me to see her pupils dilate. "Don't sit in it after dark." Her breath was sweet and stale, like rotting fruit. I drove away with the chair in my back seat, the words following me like a thread unraveling in the wind. At first, it was a story to laugh about. Something to tell Miguel when he came by that night to help me with the bathroom sink that wouldn't stop dripping. But when he stepped into the living room, he stopped. His hand froze mid-gesture toward his toolbox. "Why's someone already sitting there?" he asked. I turned. The wicker chair sat empty in the corner, angled toward the television. I told him there was no one. He looked at me, then back at the chair, and finally shook his head as though the air was playing tricks. Later that night, Tasha, my roommate, my sometimes friend, sometimes sister, depending on the day, came in from her bartending shift. She dumped her bag, kicked off her shoes, and caught sight of the chair. "I don't like that thing," she muttered. "Looks like it's been used. Nobody had touched it. Not me, not her." That night I dreamed of creaking wood, the sound of something leaning back, then forward, the breathless squeak of weight on woven wicker. I woke to the faint scent of damp straw. The next day, the motel seemed different. Room 12's bathroom mirror didn't match my movements. When I wiped the counter, my reflection hesitated before following. Guests whispered complaints, shadows sliding under their doors, televisions turning on with static at 3 a.m. I blamed the mildew, the humidity, the drugs they probably brought in their suitcases. But when I went home, the chair was waiting. I tried moving it, shoved it against the wall, covered it with a blanket, dragged it into the storage closet, shut the door. Each morning it returned. Sitting in the living room, watching my bed, the silence grew thicker. Tasha began avoiding home. She said I was spiraling, dragging her into my paranoia. I told her she was blind. We screamed at each other, then fell silent. The chair stayed. The storm came on a Saturday night. Lightning split the sky. Rain pelted sideways, needling through the cracks in the window frame. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the chair, dragged it into the stairwell, my arms scratched by wicker that seemed to resist. I pulled it into the street, raised it, smashed it against the curb. The wood cracked, split. Splinters cut my hands. I tore it apart until it was nothing but shards bleeding into the gutter. The thunder drowned out my gasping. The street lay empty, the rain relentless. But when I climbed the stairs, dripping raw, I heard it. The creak of wicker. Not in the street, in the stairwell, climbing. I left Clearwater 2 weeks later. I told Tasha I needed a clean start. I told Miguel I was sick of the motel. I told myself that what I had done on that stormy night was final, that broken things stayed broken. But silence has a way of following, heavier than luggage, more persistent than memory. I went north. Jacksonville first, then up the coast, grabbing at jobs that didn't last. Waitressing, temp office work, cleaning again. Each apartment was temporary, each mattress too thin, each wall too white. But every night the silence filled in the spaces. It began with sound, the faint creak of wood, the shifting exhale of wicker under weight. Sometimes it came from the corner of the room, sometimes from just outside the door. Once I woke to find it inside my dream, folding seamlessly into the noise of rain on a roof, so that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then came the smells. Damp straw, dust that clung to the back of the throat, a sweetness like perfume gone sour. I changed locks, moved apartments, threw away furniture that reminded me of it. None of it mattered, because it followed. Miguel called me once, months later. Said the motel was worse since I left. Shadows heavier, rooms colder. He asked if I'd taken something with me. His voice half a joke, half a plea. I hung up before I could answer. Tasha didn't call at all. I thought of her often, though. I wondered if she still avoided couches, if she still refused to nap in rooms where wicker could groan. The chair had become more than an object. It was a presence, one I couldn't outrun. Some nights, when thunder rolled across the city, I woke to the mattress dipping beside me. The air would grow damp, thick with the scent of straw. I never looked. Looking would make it real. But one night I did. I turned my head, just slightly, and saw the impression in the sheets beside me, sinking as though someone had finally settled in. The room was too dark to see more. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I worked until my body gave out, until I could hardly stand. But exhaustion only made it worse. Dreams and waking life blurred. I saw the chair on street corners and shop windows waiting at bus stops. Sometimes whole, sometimes broken, but always there. I left again. Another city, another apartment, another name on another lease. But silence knows no boundaries. Now, when the night is still and the air heavy, I hear it clearly. The creak, the sigh, the rhythm of something that was once a chair but has become a shadow with weight, with breath, with patience. I don't tell anyone anymore, because how do you explain that silence itself has learned to sit beside you? That no matter how far you run, you'll always hear wicker groaning in the dark? That what you carried home from a stranger's yard on a humid afternoon in Clearwater has decided to carry you instead? I write this now in another nameless apartment, another borrowed life. Outside, a storm gathers, thick with the smell of ozone. The thunder is low, steady, rolling, and beneath it, closer, unrelenting. The sound of wicker waiting. Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I always thought the first warning would be loud. A scream, a crash, something that would shatter the illusion of normal. But it wasn't. It was a single, quiet knock at the wrong time. A small, deliberate sound that felt like it came from inside my own chest. My name is Marina Caldwell, and I used to believe that stability was a simple thing. A steady partner, a roof over your head, and the illusion that you were safe. I didn't know safety could be a cage until I met Ethan Caldwell, and even then it started as a comfort I mistook for love. Ethan was meticulous, a high school history teacher by day, a volunteer at the local firehouse by night. People liked him. He had that easy charm that made neighbors lean a little closer at block parties, whispered compliments slipping between the garden hoses and the laughter of children. I fell for the gentleness of it. The way he noticed details about me no one else seemed to care about. The way he would remember the name of the barista who made my coffee wrong 3 months ago. The way he would hand me my favorite flowers, even when I hadn't asked. We moved into a pale brick house in Knoxville, Tennessee, a quiet street lined with magnolia trees, each yard groomed with a care that made my chest ache with longing for a life that felt whole. 42 Cedar Hollow Lane. It was the kind of house that smelled faintly of rain and wood polish, with sunlight pooling across the floors in the afternoons and shadows stretching long in the early mornings. At first, I thought the unease I felt was my imagination. The way Ethan sometimes lingered in the kitchen doorway just watching. The way he'd leave a note on the fridge that said, "I've checked your car just in case. Love you." He claimed it was concern, but the timing was uncanny. He appeared exactly when I planned to leave, just as if he had known. I brushed it off, and yet, small things began to build. The sense that I was never entirely alone. The muffled sounds upstairs when the house should have been empty. The faint click of a camera shutter when I turned my back. The way a hallway mirror seemed to reflect movement that I hadn't made. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. After all, Ethan was my husband. He loved me. He had saved me from the chaos of my own childhood, from the endless unpredictability of my family. But one night the illusion cracked. It was a Tuesday. The kind of night where the summer air smells like wet asphalt and magnolia petals drift lazily from the trees. I was making tea when I noticed a shadow flicker at the edge of the living room. I paused, heart thudding, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light. But then the shadow moved, slowly, deliberately, across the wall, as though it knew I was watching. I called his name. No answer. And then I saw him, standing behind the kitchen doorway, not a smile on his face, only the calm, unflinching observation that made my skin crawl. "Marina," he said softly. "Why are you watching the clock? We agreed on your routine." I laughed nervously, forcing my voice to be light. "Routine? What routine?" I told myself. But his eyes didn't flicker. They pinned me in place. And I realized then, he didn't need to yell. Control didn't have to be loud. From that night on, it escalated. At first it was subtle. He questioned my friends, suggested they were distractions. He asked for details about my daily routes, the gas stations I stopped at, the aisles I lingered in. "I just want to make sure you're safe," he would say, voice soft but unwavering. I started to check in when I left the house, every trip documented. Then came the boxes. I found them one afternoon while searching for old photo albums in the attic. Unmarked, dusty and heavy, stacked neatly in a corner I had never noticed. Inside were photographs, not just of me, but of the house, the yard, the street. Some were taken from inside the walls, others from across the street. The detail was impossible. Angles I hadn't realized were visible from the outside. Images that felt as if someone had been living inside the house, hidden, waiting. I confronted him. I wanted anger, a denial, some shred of humanity. But Ethan only smiled. "I have to know," he said. "You're mine. I need to protect you even from yourself." I wanted to run then, but I didn't. Something rooted me in place, and the fear that followed was not sudden. It was creeping, slithering through the marrow of my bones. Nights became impossible. I would lie awake, listening to the house breathe, trying to decipher whether the creaks were just wood settling or footsteps moving closer. Sometimes I would see reflections in the windows that weren't mine. A dark figure standing in the yard, just at the edge of vision. A whisper curling around the corner of a room, calling my name softly, almost lovingly, almost dangerously. It was not long before I realized the terror had moved beyond him. Ethan had become the anchor for something older, something patient. The house itself seemed to pulse with life, a breathing, watching entity that knew my habits, my rhythms, my every weakness. I would wake in the middle of the night to find doors open that I was certain I had locked, windows ajar, though the latch had never been touched. My clothes would be rearranged, folded in ways I didn't remember doing. One evening, while trying to distract myself with baking, I found a Polaroid slipped into the flour canister. Me, in the kitchen, at that very moment, flour dusting my hair. My hands shook so violently that I dropped the rolling pin, the thud echoing against the walls. I started to leave notes, letters to myself, reminders, check doors, keep windows locked, watch for shadows. I wrote them on scraps of paper and tucked them into drawers, pockets, anywhere I could think of. But the notes disappeared. Later, they reappeared in places I hadn't intended. The mailbox, the closet, even inside my handbag. Paranoia became my closest companion. I stopped trusting the mirrors in the house. I stopped trusting the sound of my own voice. I stopped trusting my own reflection in photographs. Everything became suspect. Every quiet movement an omen. The first time I tried to flee, it was quiet. Not dramatic, not heroic. I slipped into the rain, bare feet skidding against wet asphalt, clutching a stack of photographs that seemed to mock me with every step. The neighbors didn't see me. The world outside was blurred, distorted by storm clouds and streetlight glare. I ran until I found someone awake, someone to hear me, to witness the unraveling of my life. The police questioned me. They looked at the photographs, they took notes, and they didn't believe me. Not fully. Ethan had a reputation, a network of colleagues and friends, and my story was just a whisper against the weight of his name. I left the house the next morning, changed my phone, my route, my routines. I moved to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. I thought distance would bring relief, but it didn't. The envelopes started arriving after a week. No postage, no return address, just photographs. My new apartment, me walking to the grocery store, me asleep at night. And every photograph was accompanied by the faintest scent of magnolia, the same scent that hung in my old house, now invading my new one. I started sleeping in short bursts, never more than 2 or 3 hours. Every creak of the building, every rustle of wind against the windows, every distant car horn became a potential threat. Shadows no longer belonged to anyone but me. They moved, and I felt eyes in them, always watching, calculating, waiting. I stopped answering my phone. I stopped leaving the apartment. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, but when I woke one night to see a figure in the corner of my bedroom, faintly illuminated by the streetlight filtering through the blinds, I realized that fear had grown roots in my body. I whispered into the darkness, though I knew no one would answer. "Who's there?" The figure didn't move. It simply watched. And then I heard it. The same soft, deliberate voice I had first heard in my old house. "You're mine." I don't know if it was Ethan, if it was the house, if it was some force that had followed me across the city, or if my mind had finally broken. But the words sank into me like ice, freezing the air around my chest. I have not slept since. I live now in constant vigilance, existing in the margins of daylight, afraid of every reflective surface, every quiet sound, every movement that doesn't belong to me. I've stopped hoping for reprieve. I no longer wonder if I will ever feel safe. The envelopes continue to arrive. The photographs continue to appear. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can feel the shadow in the corner of the room stretching toward me, patient, silent, inevitable. And sometimes, if the air is still, the night quiet, and my heart pounding just right, I hear it again, whispering from somewhere just behind my skull. Familiar, inevitable. "You're mine." And I lie awake, staring into the darkness, and wonder whether opening my eyes would reveal him, or something far worse. I used to believe that silence meant peace, but I've learned silence can be a trap, an empty room that holds its breath just long enough to choke you. When I first left Phoenix and moved with Daniel to the house at 2145 Canyon Ridge Road on the outskirts of Santa Fe, I thought the quiet was a blessing. After years of living with the constant racket of traffic and my father's unpredictable temper, slamming doors, drunken arguments, shattering glass, the desert stillness felt like a clean slate. I wanted to believe I had stepped into a life where sound itself would be softer. Daniel Harper was part of that illusion. When we met through a mutual friend, he seemed like everything I didn't think I could ever have: stable, protective, kind in ways that felt deliberate. He was a paramedic, a man with calloused but steady hands. He spoke to me like my thoughts mattered, listened to the things I was too afraid to say out loud, and promised me I'd never be alone again. "Claire, you've been carrying everyone else's weight your whole life. You don't have to anymore. I've got you," he would say, brushing my hair back with such tenderness I almost cried. For someone like me, who had grown up begging for scraps of attention from parents who were too tangled in their own dysfunction to notice me, those words weren't just comforting, they were intoxicating. I wanted to believe Daniel when he said he would never leave, that he would always protect me. And in the beginning, he did. The first few months we lived together, he made me tea at night when my chest clenched with old panic attacks. He brought flowers home after double shifts. He learned how I liked my eggs, folded my laundry the way my mother never had patience for, and filled the house with little touches that made it feel less like a rental and more like a home. But slowly there were changes, so small at first that I barely noticed. Daniel started asking to check my phone. At first, it was framed as practicality. What if you pass out and I need to call someone? I should know your passcode. It made sense, so I gave it to him. Then he began scrolling through my texts when I wasn't looking. When I asked him why, he'd smile, tilt his head slightly and say, "Just making sure no one's distracting you from us." The first time he corrected me in public was at a dinner with his coworkers. I'd mispronounced the name of a wine on the menu, and everyone had laughed politely. Daniel's hand pressed against the small of my back, harder than necessary. "It's pronounced Cabernet, babe. Don't worry, I'll do the ordering from now on." Everyone chuckled. I forced myself to smile. But later that night, as soon as we got home, his voice hardened. "Don't embarrass me like that again. People notice when you stumble." The way he said it, calm, not angry, was scarier than yelling. I told myself this was what relationships were like. That compromise sometimes meant giving up small parts of yourself for the sake of harmony. But little by little, those parts didn't feel so small anymore. He decided what clothes I wore, what friends I could see, how much makeup was appropriate. If I questioned him, he had a way of twisting my words back onto me. "I'm just trying to protect you, Claire. Why are you being so ungrateful?" Some nights I would lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow, listening to the desert wind slide against the windows and wonder, is this love or is this prison? Then came the night everything cracked. It was June 21st, 2018, a Thursday. The air was so dry that even after sundown, the heat radiated off the asphalt in waves. Daniel came home late, his shirt wrinkled, hair damp with sweat, eyes burning with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Long shift?" I asked gently, setting down the book I hadn't really been reading. He stared at me for a long moment before answering, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You don't trust me, do you?" The question startled me. "What?" "Of course I do." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think we need to reset your perspective." I tried to laugh, to brush it off. "What does that even mean?" "We're going for a drive," he said simply, already heading for the door. "It'll be good for you." There was no question in his tone, no room for discussion. My stomach nodded, but when I hesitated, his shoulders tensed, and he turned just enough to catch my eye. "Now, Claire." I grabbed my jacket even though the night air didn't call for it. Something in me already knew I might need it. The drive started silent. Daniel's hands gripped the wheel, veins standing out against the skin. His knuckles were pale, but his breathing was steady, almost measured. The highway unspooled before us like a black ribbon, stretching into emptiness. After a few miles, he began to talk. "You've been distant, questioning me, watching me come home late like I'm sneaking around. I save lives for a living, Claire, and you don't even appreciate that." "I never said—" His hand slammed against the wheel. "Don't interrupt." I flinched. The desert air rushed in through the open windows, carrying dust that stung the back of my throat. The moon hung low and swollen, bathing the land in sickly yellow light. Everything looked flat, lifeless, like we were driving through the bones of something long dead. Daniel's voice lowered, almost hypnotic. "You're betraying me, plotting against me. Don't deny it." I swallowed hard, kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Daniel, I'm not plotting anything. I love you." He smiled then, but it was the kind of smile that made me colder instead of warmer. "Love isn't enough. You need to obey." The word lodged in me like a shard of glass. I thought of asking him to turn back, but I knew he wouldn't. His foot pressed harder on the gas, the needle climbing. The landscape blurred into streaks of sand and shadow. My pulse thudded in my ears. That's when I saw it. The flicker of neon ahead. A broken sign, half lit, announcing a desert gas station that had long been abandoned. The windows were boarded, pumps rusting in the moonlight. The place looked like a corpse of itself. Daniel slowed the car, pulling in with eerie deliberation. He killed the engine, and the silence that followed was heavier than sound. He turned to me, his smile stretching too wide. "This is where we fix things." Something in his tone made my blood run cold. The air around the gas station was stagnant, as if even the wind had abandoned this place years ago. Crickets didn't sing, dogs didn't bark, and the night itself seemed to hold back, waiting. My hand hovered near the door handle, but Daniel leaned slightly closer, his voice low, intimate, dangerous. "You don't get to walk away from this, Claire. Not until you understand." His eyes glimmered in the sickly moonlight, pupils so wide they swallowed most of the blue I used to find comfort in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I forced my voice steady. "Understand what? That you belong to me. That you've been given a second chance, my chance, and I won't let you waste it." I reached for the door, slow, deliberate, as though I could fool him into thinking it was harmless. But his hand shot across the console, fingers locking around my wrist like iron. The pressure made my bones ache. "Don't test me." His tone was flat. No anger, no rise in volume. Just a statement, colder than anything he'd said before. The world tilted then. I felt it in my body, like the desert had shifted beneath us. My father's voice came unbidden. Memories of nights I'd crept out of my bedroom to hear him tell my mother she'd ruined his life, that she was nothing without him. Daniel's words echoed those same rhythms, the same trap. And suddenly, I understood. This was never about love. It was about possession. Something broke in me. With a burst of strength I didn't know I had, I twisted my arm hard, wrenching free of his grip. His nails scraped my skin, leaving raw crescents behind. Before he could react, I shoved the door open and stumbled out into the dry night. The asphalt was cracked and jagged beneath my shoes. The desert air smelled of rust and dust and something faintly sour, like rot trapped in the walls of the station. I ran, heart pounding, every breath searing my throat. Behind me, Daniel's footsteps hit the ground. Not a sprint, steady, deliberate. He didn't need to rush. He believed I had nowhere to go. His voice carried through the stillness. "Run if you want, Claire, but you'll come back. You always do." The words slid under my skin like venom. I didn't look back. The brush along the edge of the lot tore at my jeans as I pushed into it, thorns scraping my legs, arms. The desert wasn't meant for running. The ground shifted, loose gravel sliding beneath my feet, but adrenaline kept me moving. I could still hear him behind me. Steady, measured steps, as though he was following a script. And then, something else. A sound I couldn't place. The faint crackle of static like a radio left on low. It seemed to rise from the desert itself, threading through the silence. I stumbled, catching myself on a jagged rock. My hands burned, blood warm against the cool night air. I forced myself up, gasping, pushing forward. Somewhere in the distance, headlights cut across the darkness. A truck, moving toward the highway. I screamed, my voice raw, shredding the quiet. "Help! Please!" The beam swung, the engine roared closer. I broke through the last of the brush, stumbling into the road, arms flailing. The truck screeched, horn blaring, tires spitting gravel. I nearly collapsed against the hood. The driver, a man in his 50s, face leathery from sun, ball cap pulled low, leaned out the window. "Jesus Christ, lady, you okay?" I couldn't form words. I just shook my head violently, pointing back toward the station. But when I turned, the lot was empty. Daniel wasn't there. The man narrowed his eyes. "You hurt?" "Please," I rasped, chest heaving. "Just take me. Sheriff's office. Anywhere." He didn't argue, just unlocked the door. I climbed in, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. As the truck pulled away, I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, staring at the empty station shrinking behind us. But I swear, just before it disappeared from view, I saw a figure standing beneath the broken sign, not moving, just watching. The sheriff's office was a blur of fluorescent lights and questions that blurred together. A deputy took notes while I explained, halting, trembling, how Daniel had driven me into the desert, how he'd tried to trap me. My words tumbled over each other, frantic, desperate. They sent a cruiser out. An hour later, an officer returned with a strange look on his face. "We found your husband near the station," he said. He wasn't chasing anyone, just sitting on the curb, calm as can be. My stomach twisted. "That's not..." He followed me. He was right behind me. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "Ma'am, he said you had an argument and ran off. That maybe you panicked. We'll take him in tonight, but unless we have more..." I slammed my palms against the desk. He was going to kill me. My voice cracked. Heads turned. The deputy's voice softened, almost patronizing. "We'll do what we can, ma'am. You'll need to file a statement." They let him make bail. Of course they did. I didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. The scrape on my wrist throbbed where his nails had dug in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gas station, the hollow black of the windows, the way the static seemed to hum from nowhere. I left Santa Fe within a month, changed my name, started over. But leaving didn't free me. Even now, years later, I still can't drive at night without checking my mirrors every few seconds. Sometimes I swear headlights linger too long behind me, matching my every turn. Sometimes I hear static on the radio when it isn't on. I try to tell myself it's paranoia, trauma lodged in the body like a splinter that never works its way out. But then I remember the way he looked at me that night, the way his voice carried through the desert air like a curse. "You'll never leave me for good, Claire." And the thing that keeps me awake isn't the memory of his words. It's the possibility that he wasn't making a threat. He was making a promise. Because sometimes when the night is quiet enough, I hear footsteps on gravel outside my window, slow, steady, patient. And I wonder if Daniel has found me, or if something else followed me out of that desert. Something that wears his voice like a mask. I never thought safety could feel like a trap, but from the first night I moved into that townhouse, I sensed something under the stillness, a current I couldn't name. My name is Elena Ramirez, and what I'm about to tell you isn't the kind of story that fits neatly into categories like love or fear or madness. It is all of those tangled together so tightly that sometimes I can't tell where one ends and the other begins. When I married Michael Ramirez, I thought I was choosing stability. I was 31, carrying the weight of a childhood scraped together out of absence and poverty. My parents had left me before I could read, and my grandmother raised me in a 2-bedroom house that smelled of mothballs and fried onions. She was stern, practical, and always tired. What she gave me was survival, not softness. When she passed away, I felt unmoored. I was working at a diner then, waitressing double shifts just to cover rent on a shoebox apartment that leaked every time Charleston got one of its heavy rains. Then came Michael. He was different from anyone I'd known. Confident, polished, the kind of man who seemed at ease anywhere. He was a real estate agent, successful enough that people in town knew his name. He walked into the diner one afternoon, pressed shirt, gold watch flashing as he checked his phone, and asked me about the special. I don't know why he lingered that day, but he did. He asked me about myself, actually listened. 2 weeks later, he took me to dinner at a place where the waiters wore black ties and the seafood tasted like butter melting on my tongue. I had never been with someone who wanted to give me more than I had. Michael wanted to. He bought me dresses I didn't feel comfortable wearing, shoes that cost more than my month's rent, jewelry that made my coworkers whisper. And when he proposed, standing under the live oaks at Waterfront Park with a ring that glinted like ice, I said yes. At first it was perfect. He told me we were partners, that I was his world. He called me his treasure, his reason, his home. And when he carried me across the threshold of the brick townhouse at 92 Harbor View Drive, I believed him. The house was beautiful. High ceilings, crown molding, hardwood floors that glowed in the afternoon light. Out back the marsh stretched wide, reeds swaying in the salt breeze, cicadas buzzing their endless hymn. At night, I'd stand on the balcony and listen, wine glass in hand, thinking, I made it. I'm safe now. But peace is a fragile thing. It doesn't break all at once. It erodes. It started small with questions. Who were you talking to on the phone? He'd ask, casually, as he loosened his tie in the kitchen. My friend Angela, I'd say. At 10 o'clock at night? His eyebrow would arch, and though his tone was calm, my stomach tightened. He never yelled. Not then. He didn't need to. His disapproval was sharp enough. Soon I stopped talking to Angela at night. Stopped meeting friends for coffee because it looked bad if I spent too much time away. Stopped calling anyone without glancing over my shoulder first. Then came the passwords. It's just for transparency, Elena, he said one evening, his hand covering mine on the dinner table. Couples shouldn't have secrets, don't you trust me? Of course I trusted him, or wanted to. So I gave them my phone, my email, my bank login. He thanked me with a kiss that felt more like a seal, a transaction finalized. And just like that, my world wasn't mine anymore. At first, I noticed it in little ways. My texts would be marked read even when I hadn't opened them. Emails flagged before I saw them. A package I ordered returned without my knowledge. Then, one afternoon, my debit card was declined at the grocery store. Insufficient funds, the cashier said, frowning. But I had money. I knew I did. That night, Michael slid his platinum card across the table and said, Use this from now on. It's simpler. I'll take care of us. I nodded, but something in me tightened, like a rope pulling around my chest. I tried to distract myself with the house. I cleaned, I decorated, but no matter how much I arranged flowers or scrubbed counters, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cicadas outside grew louder at night, their hum turning into a roar. Sometimes I'd wake in the dark, convinced someone was standing in the corner of the room. When I turned on the light, it was just shadows, the curtains swaying with the marsh wind. Then there were the doors. 3 of them locked. Michael called them offices. He had keys to everything. I didn't. He told me he kept important work files inside, sensitive documents. But why 3? One night, curiosity clawed at me. He had fallen asleep on the couch, a glass of bourbon at his side, the TV murmuring low. I crept upstairs and pressed my ear to one of the doors. Nothing, just silence. My hand closed around the knob. Locked. My reflection in the brass gleamed back at me, stretched, almost sneering. That's when his voice cut the air. Elena? Bed. He didn't shout. Didn't have to. I jumped back, heart slamming, and scurried past him like a guilty child. But the silence behind that door followed me, growing heavier each day. Weeks later, I found the folder. It was almost an accident. He'd left his laptop open on the counter, screen glowing. I only meant to close it, but the file was right there. ER, my initials. My hand moved before I could think. Inside were spreadsheets, pages and pages. Times I left the house, duration of errands, lists of phone calls with exact minutes logged, even my menstrual cycle, tracked with chilling precision, my bank accounts, my grandmother's medication history, addresses from years before. Every detail of me cataloged. I was still staring when I heard the creak of a stair. My blood iced. I slammed the laptop shut, grabbed a glass of water, and forced my hands to stay steady. Michael entered the kitchen, eyes flicking to the laptop, then to me. Up late? He asked softly. Just thirsty, I whispered. He leaned down, kissed my temple, and murmured, Sleep well, darling. That night I lay rigid in bed, the storm outside throwing jagged light across the room. When thunder cracked, I saw him in the chair, sitting in the corner, watching me. His breathing steady, his eyes glinting, pretending he wasn't. Fear became something alive inside me. It clawed at my ribs, begged me to run. And then came the night that broke me. November 3rd, 2020, 9:15 p.m. The storm outside was ferocious, rain lashing the windows, thunder shaking the floor. Michael moved through the house methodically, locking every door, every window. He held the keys in his hand, jingling softly, like bells at a funeral. He stopped in the hallway, his smile calm, his voice low. "You're mine, Elena. If you ever try to leave me, you won't make it out of this house alive." I don't remember deciding. My body moved. While he checked the windows, I forced open the upstairs one, rain slashing my face. The brick tore my legs as I scrambled down, barefoot, clutching nothing but my phone. I fell into the marsh, mud sucking me down, mosquitoes swarming, lightning blinding. I ran until my lungs burned, until my screams were lost in the storm. The police came. They searched. They found the rooms. Photos of me pinned to walls, recordings of my phone calls, my footsteps, maps of my routines. He had been building a cage around me long before I noticed the bars. They arrested him. But Michael was a man who knew how to smile, how to charm, how to twist words until black looked like white. He was released on bail within weeks. And now, years later, I can't tell you if he's still in Charleston or if he's somewhere near me, closer than I think. Sometimes I wake in the night to the sound of cicadas, though it's winter and the marsh outside my apartment is frozen. Sometimes I smell his cologne on my sheets, though I wash them twice a week. Sometimes in the split second between lightning and thunder, I see him reflected in the glass, standing just behind me. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's madness. Or maybe Michael never let me go. The cicadas hum at night, and under their drone I hear it, a whisper threaded through the noise. His voice, calm and patient, promising, "You're mine." And when the storms roll in, I wonder if this time I won't make it out. I didn't notice the silence at first. Not the kind outside the window, but the kind inside me. It crept into my life like fog, softening the edges of panic and loneliness, replacing them with a stillness I thought I'd been searching for my whole life. It was the summer of 2017 when I met Ethan Ross, the man I believed could finally silence the noise that had chased me since childhood. I was 20 then, restless, working part-time at a bookstore in Asheville, while taking community college classes I wasn't sure I'd finish. I had no steady plan, only a steady ache that came from growing up in a fractured home in Rochester, New York, a father who left when I was 12, a mother who numbed herself with pills, nights spent listening to arguments dissolve into slammed doors. I learned early that love was fragile, conditional, breakable. But Ethan seemed different. He carried himself with a patience I mistook for strength, with a steadiness I convinced myself meant safety. We met through a mutual friend at a coffee shop near campus. He was a graduate student in environmental engineering, his dark hair perfectly neat, his clothes pressed, his voice calm in a way that drew people toward him. When I first sat across from him, I noticed how he listened, not nodding absent-mindedly like most people, but studying me with an intensity that made my words feel important. When I laughed nervously about my tendency to overthink, he smiled. "Maybe you just need someone to help carry it," he said. That night, when he walked me to my car, my hands trembled as I searched for my keys. I brushed it off, saying I was just cold. He gently took the keys from me, unlocked the door himself, and held it open with quiet finality. "You shouldn't have to struggle with small things, Maddie," he said. His voice was low, firm, but wrapped in kindness. My chest tightened, but not in fear, in relief. No one had ever made me feel like I could hand over the weight. 3 months later, I moved into his small rental house on Willow Creek Road. The house was modest, tucked away on a wooded stretch of road where the air smelled of pine and damp earth. The neighbors lived far enough apart that their lives blurred into silence, their porch lights flickering on at dusk, like distant signals. Ethan loved the quiet. "Noise corrodes peace," he said once as we sat on the porch in the evening. I nodded because it felt true, even though part of me missed the hum of passing cars, the chatter of people on sidewalks. Inside, the house carried Ethan's order, shelves lined with books arranged alphabetically, drawers organized with almost military precision. The faint smell of cedar lingered in the air, layered over by something sharper, bleach maybe, that never seemed to fade no matter how many windows I opened. The first night as I set my suitcase in the bedroom, he wrapped an arm around my waist and whispered, "You don't have to worry about anything anymore, Maddie, I'll take care of it all." And I let myself believe him. At first, Ethan's routines felt like a balm. He woke at dawn to run, showered at the same time every morning, ate the same breakfast, eggs, spinach, black coffee. He left notes on the counter in neat handwriting. "Remember your vitamins. Drink water. Don't let stress control you." When I had a headache, he appeared with a glass of water and a pill, his expression calm, expectant. "Don't think about it. Just let me handle this." His voice had the same cadence as reassurance, but it carried something heavier, finality. I told myself this was love, that this was what safety looked like. But small cracks began to show. The way he corrected how I folded towels. The way he adjusted the way I chopped vegetables. "Trust me, Maddie. My way will save you time. You'll thank me." His smile was steady, but his eyes flickered with something else, satisfaction, when I obeyed. Then one evening I discovered several of my male contacts were missing from my phone. When I asked, he looked at me with patient amusement. "You don't need them. They're distractions. Don't you want to focus on us?" He said it like a gift, as though he'd removed a burden I hadn't realized I carried. My laugh came out nervous, brittle. Later that night, lying awake, I watched the ceiling fan spin and realized my chest felt tight in a way I couldn't name. The first true fracture came with my panic attack. I was driving home from the grocery store when my throat closed, my vision blurred, and my hands trembled so badly I could barely grip the wheel. By the time I pulled into the driveway, tears streaked my face. Ethan was already on the porch, waiting. He opened the car door before I could move, gathered me against him. "This is why you need me. I'll keep you balanced. Don't fight it, Maddie. Just let me take care of you." His voice was soothing, but the words landed like a command. And I obeyed, because obedience felt easier than questioning. Weeks passed. The house tightened around me like a fist. My car keys sometimes disappeared from the hook, only to reappear later. The doors had locks I didn't recognize, and one afternoon I discovered a key in the drawer that didn't fit any lock in the house. The windows resisted when I tried to open them, painted shut. When I dusted the bookshelf, I found a small black object tucked into the corner, a camera lens winking at me. My stomach dropped. When I confronted Ethan, he only smiled. "It's for security. You're safe here. Don't you like feeling safe?" I nodded. But that night I lay awake listening to every creak, every hum of the refrigerator, every sigh of the house. Safety no longer felt like freedom. It felt like surveillance. Then Ethan suggested we visit his estranged mother in Hendersonville. We drove in silence, the summer air heavy with the smell of rain-soaked pine. His knuckles whitened on the wheel, though his face remained calm. The house was faded yellow, shutters crooked, porch sagging. She opened the door with a tight smile, her eyes darting to me with something sharper than disapproval. Fear. At dinner, she served mushroom casserole. I explained politely that I was allergic, but she pressed the dish closer, her smile rigid. "Nonsense, everyone can eat this." I glanced at Ethan, expecting him to intervene. Instead, he nodded at me, his eyes urging compliance. My stomach churned as I forced a bite. Later, lying in the guest room, I heard whispers in the hallway. This time I pressed my ear to the door. Her voice was low, urgent, carrying words that sliced through the wood. "He used to do this to me too. He watches. He locks. He decides when you eat, when you sleep. Don't stay. Don't let him trap you like he trapped me." My blood ran cold. I pulled back just as the floor creaked. The whispering stopped. Moments later, Ethan entered the room, closing the door softly. He kissed my forehead. "Ignore her, Maddie. She doesn't understand. But I do. I'll always take care of you." That night, I woke to the press of a spoon against my lips. Ethan leaned over me, his eyes calm, his hand steady. "Eat." If you let me take care of you, nothing will ever hurt you." His voice was so certain it sounded holy. For one horrifying second, I almost obeyed. Then panic surged through me. I jerked away, spilling food across the sheets. His smile faltered but didn't disappear. He cleaned the mess in silence, then lay beside me, his arm heavy across my waist like a lock. After that, I knew I had to leave. The breaking point came on a storm-soaked evening. Rain hammered the windows, the air thick with the smell of wet leaves and electricity. I told him I needed space, just an hour to clear my head. His face stilled, the calm mask slipping. "There's nothing out there for you, Maddie. Everything you need is right here. Don't ruin this." I said nothing. But when he went to shower, I grabbed my keys. My hands shook violently, the metal clinking against itself as I fumbled. Barefoot, heart racing, I bolted out into the storm. The rain struck my skin like needles, soaking my clothes in seconds. The gravel sliced into my feet, sharp and unforgiving, each step sending shocks of pain through my body. The air smelled of mud and wet pine, thick with ozone as thunder cracked overhead. My hair clung to my face, water streaming into my eyes. I could barely see the car through the sheets of rain. My fingers slipped on the handle, the metal slick and cold. Inside, the seat was icy against my soaked skin. My breath came in ragged gasps as I jammed the key into the ignition. Behind me, Ethan's voice cut through the storm. "Maddie, don't make me chase you." His tone was calm, almost patient, but threaded with steel. The engine roared to life. Tires skidded against the slick gravel. Mud sprang as I tore down Willow Creek Road. The storm blurred the world into streaks of gray and green. My chest heaved, lungs burning, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't dare look back. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I'm living on a friend's couch in Asheville, blinds drawn, shoes by the bed in case I need to run again. Every night my phone lights up with his number. I don't answer. I can't. But I don't block him either. Blocking him feels like an invitation, like permission to come find me. Every sound unsettles me. The creak of the floorboards, the rattle of pipes, the whisper of wind against the windows. Sleep never lasts. When I dream, he is always there, his eyes calm, his voice low and certain. "If you let me take care of you, nothing will ever hurt you." I used to think love would save me. Now I know it can become a cage, forged from hunger and hope. And the worst part, the part I can't escape, is the certainty that Ethan knows exactly where to find me. I used to believe cabins were romantic. That's how David sold me on the trip in the first place. A weekend retreat, he called it, away from the noise of Atlanta, away from emails and deadlines, away from the endless pressure I carried like a second spine. In my mind, I pictured warm light spilling across knotty pine walls, the sweet smell of cedar, the way fresh mountain air would clean out the dust in my lungs. But the cabin he chose was nothing like that. It sagged on the side of a ridge like it had been forgotten there 50 years ago, shouldering weather and storms it was never built to endure. The porch slanted, the railing was splintered, and the windows had been painted shut long before I was born. A smell hit me before I even stepped inside, something like cedar and mold, a memory of trees rotting in the forest after a hard rain. David carried our bags in without complaint. He always did that. Practical, strong, helpful in ways that looked good to other people. To anyone on the outside, he was the perfect husband. But when the door closed behind us with a hollow thud, I felt the air shift. It wasn't just stale. It was heavy, as if the walls had been waiting for us. "See?" he said, flashing me a smile I used to melt for years ago. Rustic charm. Rustic wasn't the word. The floorboards complained under his boots, groaning with every step. And then, when the cabin finally went still, I realized it wasn't still at all. The place made sounds even without us moving, subtle, almost human. A low creak followed by a sigh, like the entire frame was exhaling. The sound wasn't constant, but it returned often enough to feel deliberate, as if the cabin had a rhythm of its own. "You hear that?" I asked. David set down the duffel bag, turned his head slightly, and smiled again, but this time it wasn't soft. It was mocking. "It's wood settling, Jenna. Jesus, you've lived in the city too long." I didn't answer. I just touched the wall with my fingertips. It was rough, splintered in places. The smell of cedar was stronger here, but not fresh cedar. Old, tired, laced with rot. David came up behind me and set his hands on my shoulders, giving them a squeeze that felt less like affection and more like correction. "Relax. This is supposed to be a break. Don't start with your overthinking." My overthinking. That's what he always called it when I tried to name what I felt. The first night was colder than I expected. The old fireplace was just a black mouth filled with ashes, and though David promised to light a fire later, he didn't. He sat at the small table with his laptop open, claiming he had to check one last thing. I curled up on the couch, wrapped in a thin blanket that smelled faintly of dust and smoke. The cabin breathed again. This time it was louder, a groan deep in the beams, followed by what could only be described as a soft sigh, like lungs emptying after a long day. David didn't even look up. "David," I said quietly. "It sounds like it's alive." He chuckled, that low sound he used when he wanted to make me feel foolish. "Buildings creak, old ones especially. You're projecting." But I wasn't projecting. I knew what I heard. The rhythm was too steady, too intentional. The air itself seemed to move with each exhale. I could feel it against my skin, brushing the fine hairs on my arms. I should have felt safe with him there. That's what marriage was supposed to be, right? Safety. But instead, the cabin felt like a reflection of everything I hadn't let myself say out loud. Trapped, airless, rotting from the inside. The windows were locked, painted shut years ago. I tested one, pressing my fingers against the frame, and David's voice came sharp from across the room. "What are you doing?" "Just checking," I said. "Checking what?" "If they open." "Why would you need them to open? It's freezing out there." His tone was calm, measured, but I could feel the threat beneath it, the way he demanded I back down without raising his voice. That was his gift. Always calm, always logical, but twisting every concern of mine into something laughable, irrational. "Just curious," I murmured. He stared at me a moment longer, then turned back to his laptop. But I knew I had been marked. The next morning I woke to silence. David was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. The smell of it should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It mingled with the rot in the walls, turning the air sour. "Morning," he said, cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Morning," I replied. My throat felt dry, like I'd been swallowing dust all night. He poured me a mug and handed it over, then watched me drink. I hated when he did that. Watched me like I was some experiment he was running. "Told you it would be good for us," he said. I looked at him. His eyes were bright, alive in a way that unnerved me. "Good for us?" "Yeah. Out here, no distractions, no friends meddling, no work pulling you away. Just us. Just us." The words sank into me like the smell of rot in the wood. That day passed slowly. I tried to read, but the cabin's sounds made it impossible. The breathing was louder in the daylight, punctuated by sharp cracks in the walls like bones shifting. At one point I swore I heard a whisper threaded into the sigh, a sound that almost carried words. David didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but he wouldn't admit it. Instead, he insisted we go for a walk down the ridge through the trees. He led, of course, and I followed, stumbling over roots while he lectured me about how much better this was than the city. "You're always stressed back home," he said. "Here you can finally focus on us." Focus on us. Another command disguised as care. When we returned, the cabin seemed darker even though the sun was still high. The windows let in so little light it was as if the building swallowed it. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching long and jagged. That night, The sighing grew so loud it woke me. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and listened. It wasn't just sighing anymore. It was breathing. Low and slow, like something enormous sleeping beneath the floorboards. And in the dark, David stirred beside me, murmured something I couldn't quite hear. His arm tightened around my waist, heavy, locking me in place. That was when I realized the truth. The cabin wasn't just shelter. It was a cage, and David hadn't chosen it because it was charming or romantic. He had chosen it because it was perfect. Windows locked, doors swollen shut from years of damp. No neighbors within miles. It wasn't a getaway. It was a trap. The silence in the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt alive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath with me. Every creak of the timber overhead, every shiver of wind that pressed against the thin glass panes, carried with it the sense of something watching. I could hear it again. The breathing. At first I thought it was my own, ragged and shallow. But no. This sound came from the bones of the cabin itself. A low, slow exhale like air seeping out of an old accordion. Sometimes it rose to a sigh, the kind a tired body makes when it sinks into bed after too many years of work. Other times it dipped into a hum so deep I felt it in my chest, as if the cabin's heartbeat had synced to mine. The longer I listened, the harder it was to tell where my body ended and the wood began. David didn't notice it, or if he did, he pretended not to. That was his way. If something unsettled him, he'd fold it into silence and force me to carry the weight of acknowledging it. He walked around the living room like he was taking inventory of his own property, running a hand across the splintered beams, brushing dust from a crooked picture frame of a mountain landscape. His calmness was worse than shouting. He had always believed that control wasn't in raising your voice. It was in making the other person lower theirs until they disappeared. "You see?" he said, his tone almost gentle, like a teacher coaxing a child toward the right answer. "It's sturdy enough. Not perfect, but who needs perfect when it keeps us together? The windows stay locked, the doors bolt tight, no distractions, just you and me." The smell of the place, cedar drowned in rot, thickened around me. It was in the curtains, in the warped floorboards, in the very air I tried to pull into my lungs. Every breath tasted of damp decay, like a reminder that once something starts to spoil, there's no reversing it. I thought of the first years with him, when I believed his intensity was love. Back then, his words had smelled sweet, like new wood, like possibility. But now here I knew better. Sweetness always hides the first signs of rot. He caught me pressing my palm against the window, as if I could feel the outside through the smudged glass. "Don't," he said, not sharp, but steady, final. He moved closer, his reflection sliding over mine in the dark pane. "Out there it's nothing, cold, empty, in here." He spread his arms slightly, a host presenting his sanctuary. "In here is where we breathe." The cabin sighed again, a long shudder that rattled the loose nails in the frame. I flinched, but David only tilted his head, amused. "Old places make noise," he said. "Doesn't mean they're broken. You just have to learn their rhythm." But it wasn't a rhythm, it was a warning. Each groan of the beams above felt like the complaint of something forced to carry too much weight. I ran my fingers across the sill and came away with flakes of peeling paint and something damp, soft as mold. The smell clung to me, bitter and sour, a smell you couldn't wash out no matter how hard you scrubbed. Just like him. When I didn't answer, David stepped closer, his voice dropping into that dangerous softness he used when he wanted to remind me who he was. "I brought you here because I knew you'd understand. No neighbors, no interference. Just us, the way it's supposed to be. You think that's a prison? I think it's a gift." His logic always wound itself into a perfect circle. No matter where I tried to escape, I ended up right back at him. If I said I felt trapped, he'd call it protection. If I begged for space, he'd say, "Love needs closeness." If I pointed out the rot, he'd say everything grows stronger after weathering storms. He had an answer for everything, each word polished and deliberate, until I almost believed him, until the cabin breathed again and reminded me whose lungs were really filling this space. He reached out then, tracing a finger over my cheek. The gesture might have looked tender to anyone else, but I felt the weight behind it, the pressure of ownership. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "This place breathing with us, it's alive like us. It bends, it groans, but it holds, just like we do." I wanted to scream that it didn't hold, that the air inside was poison, that every sigh of the cabin was a death rattle, not proof of strength. But my throat constricted. My body had learned his lessons too well. Don't raise your voice, don't contradict too hard, don't give him reason to turn that calmness into the storm I knew lurked beneath. The hours stretched. Time moved differently in the cabin, like the sagging clocks in old surrealist paintings. Sometimes the fire crackled, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the breathing rose so loud I thought the roof would collapse, then it would vanish so completely I doubted I'd ever heard it at all. My stomach ached with hunger, but David didn't seem to notice, or he did, and chose not to. When I finally asked, barely above a whisper, "Can we go now?" he smiled. Not cruelly, not angrily, just a slow, patient smile, like I was a child asking for candy before dinner. "Go? Why would we leave when we've only just arrived?" The cabin shuddered, a deep moan vibrating up through the floorboards. I pressed my hand flat against the wood, feeling the tremor in my bones. "It doesn't want us here," I said before I could stop myself. David chuckled softly. "You hear ghosts where there are none. This place wants exactly what I want, for you to stay. Once you accept that, you'll stop fighting." But I couldn't accept it. Every locked window reminded me of the nights I tried to slip from his grip only to feel his hand close around my wrist, firm, but never violent enough to leave a mark. Every bolt on the door echoed the way he bolted conversations shut when I begged for freedom. The smell of rot was the smell of my own love decaying, piece by piece, until all that remained was something foul I couldn't bear to inhale. Night pressed heavier against the glass. The forest outside had gone silent, as if even the crickets were holding their breath. David sat in the armchair by the fire, shadows carving his face into something almost handsome again, almost like the man I once loved. He leaned back, legs crossed, hands steepled, and watched me as if waiting for me to surrender. "You know why you're scared?" he said after a long silence. "Because you keep clinging to what's outside. You think freedom is out there, but out there you're no one. Out there you're lost. In here with me, you're seen, you're whole. I am the walls that keep you safe. Without me, you collapse." The words slithered into me, dangerous in their certainty. For a moment I almost let myself believe him because believing meant survival. But the cabin groaned again, a sharp crack that split the silence like a warning shot. Dust rained from the ceiling, and I saw David's calm falter just slightly, his eyes darting upward before he smoothed his face again. "Even strong things break," I whispered, more to myself than to him. His smile returned, but this time there was an edge to it. "Not if they're cared for. Not if they're loved the right way." The right way. His way. Always his way. The fire dwindled and the shadows grew thicker, pooling in the corners of the cabin like something alive. I thought I saw movement once, just a ripple, a shifting shape, but when I blinked it was gone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin wasn't just breathing, it was listening. Listening to him, listening to me, deciding which one of us it would side with. I lay awake long after David's eyes closed, his body slumped in the chair like a man certain of victory. The air grew colder, each draft carrying that wet fungal scent deeper into my lungs. My skin prickled, my throat burned, my chest ached with every shallow inhale. And through it all, the cabin sighed. Sometimes soft, sometimes guttural, as if it were choosing whether to cradle me or swallow me whole. I thought of the girl I used to be, The one who once dreamed of walking streets lined with possibility, not locked inside a rotting shell of someone else's making. That girl was still in me somewhere, gasping for air, pounding on the locked windows of my chest. And in that moment, with the cabin groaning around me and David's twisted logic still echoing in my ears, I knew. If I didn't find a way out tonight, I never would. I told myself this trip was supposed to heal us, but even as the car crawled up Pinehurst Drive in Ashland, Oregon, the shadows between the trees looked too still, too deliberate, as if they had been waiting for us. My name is Maya Dawson. I was 17 that summer of 2021, and I carried more weariness than a girl my age should have. Dad had been gone nearly a year by then. Not dead, not sick, just gone. He left with a suitcase one Wednesday morning, and we never saw him again. He left no note, no explanation, just a hollow echo in the walls, and a mother who sat too long at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched coffee until it went cold. His absence clung to me differently. I stopped trusting things that were supposed to last. Friends, teachers, even my own body when I looked at it in the mirror. It all felt temporary, like at any second it might dissolve into nothing. I built a shell around myself, filled it with late-night scrolling, music loud enough to drown thought, and the quiet performance of being fine. But I wasn't. Mom thought this weekend away would fix it, or at least start to. An Airbnb at 1324 Pinehurst Drive, Ashland, 4 days in a picture-perfect house where, she said, we can remember who we are, just us. I wanted to believe her. I wanted the trip to be more than her desperate attempt at escape. The house was as quaint as the listing promised. Pale blue shutters, roses along the walk, a porch sagging under the weight of its own history. But the shutters were nailed shut. Every window was sealed like an eye forced closed. And then there was Mark Whitfield, the host. He was in his early 40s, trim, his shirt ironed sharp, his hair combed with precision. He smiled as he greeted us, but it was the kind of smile that seemed rehearsed. His eyes didn't move with it. They stayed fixed, watching. Mom called him polite. I thought of him as measuring. Inside, the house smelled overwhelmingly of lemon cleaner, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. The furniture looked staged, as though no one had ever actually lived there. Vintage chairs angled just so, lace curtains too stiff to move. Every picture frame tilted at the same angle. Not one, not two, but every single one. There was a note waiting on the nightstand in the room Mom and I were supposed to share. Neatly folded, handwritten in blocky, cramped letters. Please text me every night before you sleep. Safety is important. Mom chuckled nervously, tucking the note into her purse instead of throwing it out. Guess he's a worrier, she said, trying too hard to make it sound harmless. I noticed the way her hands lingered on the paper, like she felt the same wrongness I did but didn't want to name it. That night, lying in the too quiet room, I heard it. A faint scratching. Not the creak of an old house, not wind. A deliberate scratching, steady, desperate, from behind the bathroom wall. I pressed my ear to the plaster. It was cold, colder than it should have been. At first, it was nothing but the rustle of old beams, or maybe the faint echo of plumbing. But then, faint, so faint I could have imagined it, a sound threaded through. A whisper, a vibration more than a voice. I strained to hear. It could have been anything. The whine of distant pipes, a radio left on somewhere, or a trick my mind wanted to play on me. Still, the wordless murmur left a cold knot in my chest. The next morning, Mark showed up at the kitchen door with a basket of muffins. His smile was still pinned in place. He brushed Mom's hand when he passed them to her, just a hair too long, too purposeful. I saw her flinch, though she smoothed it over quickly. She wanted to believe in kindness. She needed to. By midday, I was already exploring. I found the locked door at the end of the hall. Heavy wood, new frame. Another locked door led down to the basement, a thick padlock in place. Storage, Mark said when I asked. Too fast, too flat. His gaze didn't leave me when he said it. That second night I woke again, this time not to scratching but to voices. A man's low hiss, a woman's broken sob, then a sharp sound, like someone had clamped a hand over her mouth. Silence swallowed it after. I shook Mom awake. "You heard that, right?" She blinked at me, disoriented. Her eyes searched my face, then the dark ceiling. She pressed her hand over mine and whispered, "Walls carry sound. Old houses do that." But her voice trembled, and in the faint glow of the hall light leaking through the door, I saw her jaw tighten. She'd heard it. She just didn't want to believe it. The next morning, in the bathroom, I found something in the drain, a glint of metal. I pried it out with the end of my toothbrush. A gold bracelet, delicate, feminine, still faintly warm as if it had been worn moments ago. I shoved it into my pocket, nausea rolling through me. The house pressed heavier after that. The lemon cleaner stank of something metallic like rust. The nailed curtains made the night suffocating. Another note appeared under the door. "Keep the windows locked. Trust me." Was it a warning or a command? By the third night, I couldn't keep silent. I followed the faint crying down the hall, pressed my ear against the locked basement door, whispered, "Hello." Silence. Then, 3 faint knocks. Deliberate, rhythmic. My hand shook as I found the key in the kitchen drawer under a stack of towels. I don't know what compelled me, curiosity, fear, maybe both. But I fitted into the padlock and turned. The door creaked open. The smell hit me. Damp earth, sweat, iron, blood. The stairs groaned as I stepped down. A single bulb swung weakly, its light barely clinging to the shadows. And there, at the far end, she sat. A woman, thin, pale, wrists raw, her eyes hollow, yet burning when they landed on me. Her lips moved, her voice twisted, static laced with sobs. "He won't let me leave. He won't let any of us leave." Her shadow didn't match her body. It twitched and stretched across the wall, moving on its own. I stumbled back, bile rising. Then the light snapped off. The stairs creaked above me. He was there. Mark. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He just stood at the top of the stairs, his figure a silhouette against the faint kitchen glow. His voice floated down, calm, steady, as though we were discussing curfew instead of something unspeakable. Curiosity can be dangerous, Maya. I froze, every muscle locking. He didn't move. He didn't need to. His stillness was suffocating, his calmness worse than rage. The woman's hand clawed at my wrist, ice cold, pulling me back toward her. I tore free, stumbling upward. At the top, he stood, still blocking the way. He looked at me with something deeper than anger, a kind of hunger. He didn't raise the knife until I shoved past him, until the illusion of control broke. Then the gleam of steel appeared, precise in his hand. "Stay," he whispered. I screamed for Mom, yanking her from bed. She looked at me, eyes wild, breath shaking, then at him, standing in the doorway, composed, knife glinting. "Angela," he said softly, like they were lovers. "You don't have to leave. You can both stay. Safe. With me." Her face crumpled with terror. She grabbed my hand. "Run." We tore through the back door, roses clawing our skin as we stumbled into the night. His footsteps followed, steady, measured, not running, not rushing, confident. The neighbor's house was dark, empty, no answer to our pounding fists. My chest heaved. I grabbed the garden hose reel, swung it hard, shattered their back window with the metal nozzle. Mom climbed through first, pulling me after. Only then did I hear the sirens. Distant, nearing, too perfectly timed. Police dragged him away that night. His wife, or her ghost, was carried out, whispering words only I seemed to hear. "He'll come back for me." The papers called him a monster. They didn't mention her shadow. They didn't mention the static in her voice, the way it clings to my ears when I try to sleep. Mom says it's over. but her voice shakes now when she says it. Sometimes she holds me too tight, as though trying to crush the memory out of us both. Other times she insists it was trauma, hallucination, nothing real. I see her searching my face, desperate for me to agree. But I can't, because sometimes, in my own room at home, I wake to faint scratching inside the walls. And sometimes, folded neatly on the floor by my bed, I find a note. The same handwriting. Don't trust him. I don't know if it's her, or him, or me. And that's what terrifies me most. I used to think safety had a sound, a certain softness in the way wind brushed through magnolia leaves outside our little house on Brookshire Avenue, the quiet sigh of a kettle steaming in the kitchen, the murmur of my husband's voice in the evening as he prayed aloud, head bowed, eyes closed. I clung to those sounds like proof that my life was finally steady. After all the years of chaos I had survived, the nights when I used to wake in my childhood home and swear someone was whispering my name from the dark, I believed this house and this marriage would be different. But sometimes safety is just silence hiding the wrong kind of noise. Paul Moreno was the man everyone admired. He was gentle in the pulpit, slow to anger in the grocery store line, the kind of husband people pointed to and said, "You're lucky." And I believed them at first. How could I not? He was tender when we first married, brushing my hair back from my forehead when I fell asleep on the couch, leaving notes in the fridge beside packed lunches that said, "Love you, sweet girl." He spoke with such conviction about faith, about duty, about the sanctity of marriage, that I convinced myself every correction, every quiet suggestion about my clothes, my words, my posture was just love in disguise. It's only now, looking back, that I hear the edge under his voice in memory, a faint static I ignored, like something behind the walls of our home had been waiting all along. The first time I remember truly questioning myself was over something so small it should have slipped past unnoticed. I had gone to the store alone, bought 2 bags of flour, a carton of eggs, and a jar of honey. When I carried the groceries inside, Paul was already sitting at the table waiting. His smile looked warm, but didn't quite reach his eyes. "You bought the wrong kind of honey, Lydia," he said, holding it up like evidence. I stared at the label. Wildflower, not clover. I could have sworn it was the same brand I'd bought before, but his certainty made my stomach flip. I laughed it off, made a joke about how at least it was still honey, but he only set it on the counter and said, "I'll write the list next time. That way it'll be right." A tiny thing. So small. But I went to bed that night wondering if I had remembered wrong, if I was the careless one. That's how it started, with the small doubts that multiply like shadows when the lights flicker. By winter 2022, the cracks in our life spread like frost on a window pane. He checked my phone, just to make sure you're safe. He rewrote my lists in his tight, neat handwriting. At night, he called me into the den for what he named confession talks. He'd ask me what I thought about during the day, who I spoke to, if I ever doubted him. If I hesitated, his eyes would narrow, and his voice would slip into that dangerous softness. "Be honest, sweetheart. The truth keeps us close." I told myself he loved me too much, that his vigilance was care. But some nights, when the house creaked as if something unseen walked its halls, I wondered if love was supposed to feel like being watched even when you were alone. I leaned on my childhood friend Maya for a while. She'd invite me out for coffee, laugh at Paul's stiffness, remind me that I used to be freer. But soon Paul started frowning when her name came up. "She doesn't respect our marriage, Lydia. She mocks us. You don't need voices like that." Slowly, her calls went unanswered, and when she dropped by, I told her I was busy. I hated myself for it, but part of me believed him. His voice was always steadier than mine. The night I found the recorder changed everything. I was dusting under the couch cushions when my fingers brushed against hard plastic. I pulled out a little black device, the red light still blinking. I sat frozen, pulse hammering in my ears. When Paul came home, I held it out to him, trembling. "Why?" I whispered. He smiled, took it from me like I'd handed him a gift. A husband has a right to know his wife's heart. Then he kissed my forehead and locked our bedroom door from the outside. The click of the lock echoed through me like a gunshot. After that, the house began to shift. I'd hear faint whispers at night. Not quite Paul's voice, not quite mine. Sometimes I'd find things moved slightly, the chairs angled differently, the clock's hands not where I remembered. I told myself it was exhaustion. But deep down, I wondered if the house itself had joined in his game of remaking me. He started telling me I forgot conversations that I'd promised things I never remembered saying. "You're tired, Lydia. You mix things up. That's why I keep notes. That's why I guide you." And I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too terrifying. That I was either losing my mind or he was bending it until it broke. By January, I realized I had no access to money, no working car, and every call I made was somehow monitored. My world had narrowed to the kitchen window, the one above the sink that looked out on the neighbor's yard. I began leaving small signals there, turning a flower pot upside down, breaking a twig in a strange pattern, hoping someone might notice. No one ever did. Or if they did, they pretended not to. One stormy night, unable to sleep, I crept down the hall and heard him speaking in the den. His voice was low, steady, like prayer, but the words chilled me. "She's almost ready. Once she stops fighting, she'll be perfect." My throat closed. I backed away silently, heart hammering against my ribs. That was when I knew escape was the only option, even if it killed me. The morning of February 2nd came wet and cold, the rain falling hard against the windows. He left early for a prayer service, the sound of the front door shutting like a drumbeat in my ears. I waited until the silence settled, then slipped into the bathroom, locked the door and smashed the small window with a porcelain soap dish. Glass bit into my hand, hot blood spilling across my wrist. But I didn't care. I squeezed through, tore my clothes on the jagged edges and stumbled barefoot into the rain. I ran. I don't know how I made it the 2 miles to Maya's apartment. My feet were cut, my breath ragged, but adrenaline carried me. When she opened the door and saw me, soaked, bleeding, shaking, she didn't ask. She just pulled me inside and locked it behind us. The police came. They listened. They nodded. But Paul's reputation weighed heavier than my words. "She's unstable," he told them. "She's been under stress. She invents things." And his congregation echoed him, their voices like a chorus. Perfect husband, dutiful wife gone astray. I was placed in protective housing, but no charges ever stuck. Paul went on preaching, smiling, shaking hands after Sunday service. Now months later, I live under another name, another roof, in a town where no one knows me. But the nights have not left me. I wake at 2 a.m. to phantom knocks on the door, always 3 in a row, soft as a breath. Sometimes half asleep, I hear his voice through the walls, gentle and unhurried. "Sweetheart, let me in. You know I'll always find you." I tell myself it isn't real, just echoes in my head. But sometimes when I step into the kitchen at dawn, I find the clock hands turned slightly, the chair angled differently, the sense that someone has been there, watching, waiting. And the question that keeps me awake long after the whispers fade is the one I can't silence. Did I escape Paul? Or did he plant himself so deep inside me that I'll never be free? I always thought marriage would bring me peace. That's what I told myself the night I sat in my kitchen in Toledo, Ohio, staring at the clock that ticked too loudly, like a nervous heartbeat trying to remind me it was still there. The second hand dragged, jerking its way around the numbers, and every sound it made drilled into me. The radiator clanked, the refrigerator hummed, even the lights above me buzzed faintly. But none of it mattered compared to what I was waiting for. The sound of his car in the driveway, the door unlocking, his shoes on the tile. Daniel Miller, my husband. To anyone else, he was respectable, admired, a man with neatly pressed shirts, polished shoes, a strong handshake. The kind of man who led finance meetings by day, shook the pastor's hand after church on Sundays, and smiled with clean, perfect teeth when the neighbors waved. They saw charm. They saw security. They saw a man who belonged in glossy magazines about the American dream. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see how his smile could stay in place while his eyes turned sharp, cold, like glass splintering. They didn't hear how his voice could slide into that careful, measured tone, the one that made my stomach drop because calm Daniel was worse than angry Daniel. Calm meant control, and control meant punishment. It hadn't always been this way. That was the cruelest part. He didn't start as a nightmare. In college, he had been safety. He had been the opposite of my father. No slurred words, no stumbling home drunk, no smashed plates against the wall. Daniel carried my books, walked me home at night, pressed his hand gently at the small of my back like I was something fragile he intended to protect. He told me my messy family didn't scare him, that I wasn't too much, that I was the kind of girl worth choosing. And when you grow up starved for steadiness, a man like that feels like salvation. It wasn't until after the wedding that the rules started. Don't leave dishes in the sink overnight. Ants will come. Harmless enough, logical even. Then it became, don't wear sweatpants outside the house. People will think I don't provide for you. A little strange, but I told myself it was pride, not cruelty. Later, don't call me after 5. If something's important, wait until I get home. Emergencies make me look weak. And still later, don't use the Wi-Fi after midnight. We need rest. Shut down your phone. I'll unplug the router. At first, the rules seemed small, little pieces of a puzzle that didn't look like a trap until it was finished, and I realized I was inside it. And each rule had a consequence, not always immediate, but inevitable. If I broke one, the punishment came. A lecture so long it bent into midnight. A day of silence so heavy I thought I was invisible. A hand around my wrist, tight enough to remind me who was stronger. By year 3, there wasn't a part of my life that didn't feel monitored. That night, January 18th, 2019, the kitchen felt colder than the winter air pressing against the windows. The casserole sat on the table, steam already gone, food cooling too fast. He hated food that wasn't hot. I could already hear the line he would use, calm and surgical. If you cared, you'd time it right. My throat was dry. I rubbed at the spot on my arm that still ached from last week's lesson, a bruise shaped like the outline of his fingers. When the door opened, I flinched. Daniel stepped inside, holding a bottle of wine like it was a gift, like he was a man surprising his wife with something romantic. His coat was buttoned neatly, his tie perfectly aligned. He kissed me on the cheek, and to anyone else that kiss would have looked loving. But his hand lingered on my arm, squeezing just a fraction too tight. A message written in pressure. Don't forget who you belong to. I saw you today, he said softly, setting the wine on the counter. His tone was casual, conversational, but my stomach tightened at the words. Talking to the neighbor, Mrs. Harper, isn't it? I nodded. She wanted her casserole dish back. You looked animated. He poured the wine with slow precision, filling the glass just below the rim. Not a drop spilled. Daniel was always precise, always in control. He handed me the glass but didn't let go until I looked him in the eye. Do you think I don't notice? Do you think I don't see how long you smile when you're with other people? His grip tightened slightly, just enough to make my hand tremble against the stem of the glass. Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. I nearly dropped the wine. Daniel's smile reappeared instantly, smooth and perfect, as he went to answer. Mrs. Harper stood there, holding out a folded towel. Forgot to give this back with the dish, she said, her eyes flicking past him to me. Concern flickered there, but she didn't linger. Thank you, Daniel said warmly, closing the door with deliberate care. He turned back, the smile dissolving as if it had never been there. His eyes locked on me, sharp and unreadable. The rest of the evening stretched like a wire pulled too tight. In the bedroom, he locked the door. He whispered his accusations in my ear, calm and venomous. His words weren't loud, but they cut deeper than screams ever could. He promised that if I embarrassed him again, if I dared to draw attention in ways he didn't approve, he'd make sure no one else would ever look at me. His hand brushed the side of my face, tender in appearance, but the pressure behind it told the truth. Later, when he passed out, shirt half unbuttoned, breath sour with wine, one hand limp over the edge of the bed, I lay awake listening to the clock in the hall. Tick, tick. Each sound louder than the last. Something inside me broke that night. Not with noise, not with drama, but with quiet, absolute clarity. If I stayed, I would disappear. I slid out of bed, every board beneath my feet a betrayer. My hands shook as I pulled the shoebox from under the dresser. Inside, crumpled bills I had saved from grocery runs, cash Daniel never noticed missing. My emergency exit. My only chance. I wrapped myself in my coat, bare feet already numb against the floor. The house groaned as I crept toward the back door. Then it happened. A floorboard squeaked. Daniel stirred. His breathing shifted. My blood turned ice. I froze, counting the uneven rhythm of his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then they steadied. I moved again. The night air stabbed at me as I slipped outside. Snow crunched under my bare feet, sharp crystals cutting skin. The pavement was black ice in places, slick and merciless. Each step sent a spike of pain up my legs. My lungs burned from the cold, but adrenaline carried me. The pain was real, and with every sting I felt alive. Alive because I was finally moving, finally defying him. By the time I reached the 24-hour gas station 2 blocks away, my toes were bleeding, my coat flapping uselessly against the freezing wind. I burst inside, shoebox clutched against my chest, hair plastered to my face with sweat. The clerk stared, his eyes widened. "Call 911, I gasped. "Please." He fumbled for the phone. My knees shook so violently I thought they'd give out. Minutes stretched into lifetimes until the flashing red and blue lights painted the glass windows. I pressed against the counter, every muscle trembling. When the officers came in, they didn't need my story to believe me. The bruises climbing my arms, the way my voice cracked with every word, told them more than I could. They guided me outside, one hand steady at my elbow. And then I saw him. Daniel appeared down the block, staggering, shirt half open, eyes wide and wild, his voice carrying across the frozen street. For a moment, terror crushed me. He was coming. He'd drag me home. The rules would tighten, and I'd never escape again. But then something shifted. The officers intercepted him, blocking his path. He tried to argue, his voice calm at first, precise. When that didn't work, the mask cracked, his words spilling louder, sharper. He reached out, and that was enough. The handcuffs clicked shut, steel against his wrists. The power shifted in that instant, and I felt it deep in my bones. For the first time, he wasn't the one in control. For the first time, I wasn't the one trembling under his stare. I thought that would be the end. Months later, in a small apartment across town, deadbolts secured on every door, curtains drawn tight, I told myself I was safe. But safety isn't permanent. It doesn't last. Sometimes in the dead of night, I wake to sounds that shouldn't be there. A low hum outside, like the idle growl of a car engine sitting in the dark. The smell of his cologne faint on my coat when I swear I haven't worn it in weeks. And last Tuesday when I came home, the shoebox of cash was on the wrong side of the closet floor. No money missing, no sign of forced entry, just moved, as if someone wanted me to know they had been there. I tell myself it's paranoia. I tell myself it's impossible. But deep down, I know the truth. Daniel was never the kind of man who would let go. I never realized how fragile silence could feel until I moved into that house on Canyon Creek. At first it seemed ordinary, quiet, suburban, tucked into the end of a cul-de-sac where the streetlights hummed faintly at night. But silence has a way of carrying weight, of pressing against you like a hand on your chest, especially when you're alone in the dark with nothing but your own thoughts. That silence was the first thing that unsettled me. Not Mark, not the house itself, just the silence, the kind that seemed to listen. I told myself I was being dramatic. I always had that streak in me, according to my mother. "You're too sensitive, Sophia," she'd say when I cried over small things. "You feel too much." Mark had said something similar when we first started dating, but in his voice it had sounded like a compliment. "That's what I love about you. You're tender in a world that's hard." I clung to those words for longer than I cared to admit. We met at a church fundraiser the summer after I graduated college. I wasn't looking for anyone. I had just come back from a breakup that left me hollow. But Mark was magnetic in that quiet, steady way some men are. He wasn't flashy or loud, but he made you feel seen. He asked about my degree, what books I liked, what my childhood was like. No one had ever seemed so curious about me. By the end of that evening, when he walked me to my car and told me I had a light in me most people didn't, I thought I had stumbled onto the kind of love people prayed for. Looking back now, I can see how carefully it was constructed. The perfect timing of his texts, the little gifts left on my doorstep, the way he always seemed to show up when I was feeling low. It felt like fate, but it was control dressed up as devotion. That realization would take me years. When we married, he insisted on buying the house himself. "A fresh start for us," he said as he unlocked the door for the first time. It was bigger than I expected. 2 stories, pale yellow siding, a neat lawn out front, and a backyard framed with pine trees. Inside, the walls smelled faintly of fresh paint mixed with something older, dust maybe, or mildew hiding beneath. I brushed it off as the scent of a house long vacant. I wanted so badly to believe it was a dream come true. I'd grown up in cramped apartments, sharing rooms with Isabella, my younger sister. We'd whispered to each other at night about the lives we wanted, how we'd decorate our future homes, the freedom we'd have once we got out. And here I was, standing in my very own kitchen with granite countertops, married to a man who said he would take care of me forever. The first strange thing happened only a few nights after moving in. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke to a sound I couldn't place. At first I thought it was the plumbing, an old house groaning under the strain of winter. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. A woman crying. It was faint, distant, but distinct. Soft sobs, muffled as though coming through a closed door. I sat up, holding my breath, straining my ears. Mark lay beside me, his chest rising and falling evenly in sleep. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded to the door. The hallway stretched out before me, dark and still. The sound seemed to drift from somewhere down there, moving, almost alive. "Hello?" I whispered. The crying stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. I stood frozen for a long moment, my pulse racing. Finally, I shook my head, told myself it had to be a dream, and crawled back into bed. Mark stirred as I lay down. "What are you doing?" he mumbled, half asleep. "I thought I heard someone crying," I whispered. He opened his eyes just enough to glance at me, then closed them again. "That was you. You were crying in your sleep." His certainty chilled me more than the sound itself. The next morning I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had cried in my sleep. Stress, adjustment, whatever. But deep down, I knew. The sound I'd heard wasn't coming from me. That was only the beginning. Over the weeks that followed, the crying returned. Sometimes faint, sometimes loud enough that I woke with my heart pounding. Always a woman's voice. Always mine. When I told Mark, he insisted I was imagining it. "You need to relax," he said. pouring me a cup of tea one morning. "You've been through a lot. The move, the wedding, it's a lot of change. No wonder you're unsettled." But then he began to act different. I'd wake to find the lights on, my phone recording audio on the nightstand. Once I woke to the sound of the front door locking, only to find him standing there with the keys in his hand. "Why are you locking us in?" I asked. "For your safety," he said simply. "You never know who's out there." I wanted to believe him, but his eyes didn't match his words. There was something too calm, too calculated in the way he watched me. The worst was the night I woke to find him standing at the foot of the bed. He wasn't moving, just watching. "Mark?" My voice trembled. "What are you doing?" "You were crying again," he said. I wasn't. He tilted his head slightly, his face shadowed in the dim light. Then who was it? That question haunted me. I began to feel like the house itself was against me. Doors I swore I left open were locked. My belongings shifted places. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the mirrors, just a flash, like someone passing behind me. I confided in Isabella. She came over one afternoon while Mark was at work. We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from our coffee. "You don't sound okay," she said, studying me. "I'm not," I admitted. "Something's wrong here. I hear things, and Mark, he keeps saying it's me, but I don't think it is." Her brow furrowed. "Soph, you need to leave. Whatever this is, it's not safe." "I can't," I whispered. "He controls everything. My phone, my bank account, even the keys. I don't know how to get out." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then I'll help you. Just say the word." I nodded, but fear clamped down on me like a vice. That night, when I checked the closet where I had hidden a small bag of clothes and essentials, it was gone. In its place was a folded note. "Don't cry. I'll take care of you." I nearly collapsed right there. From then on, it felt like Mark was 2 steps ahead of me. I'd think about leaving, and he'd say something that made it clear he knew. I stopped sleeping. The crying grew louder, sharper, until it seemed to fill the entire house. Finally, on February 19th, I made the choice. I texted Isabella, "Pick me up tonight. Don't knock, just wait down the street." I waited until Mark went upstairs, then crept down with my purse. The rain was coming down in sheets, cold air slicing through my jacket. My heart was hammering so loudly I thought he would hear it, but when I reached the front door, my blood ran cold. He was standing there, waiting. He didn't yell. He didn't grab me. He just smiled, calm and terrifying. "Going somewhere?" I swallowed hard. I need some air." "You don't need air." His voice was gentle, almost tender. "You need me. Otherwise, the crying will never stop." Something inside me snapped. I bolted past him, yanked the door open, and ran into the rain barefoot. My feet slapped against the pavement, pain shooting up my legs as I sprinted down the street. I didn't look back until I saw Isabella's headlights. I dove into her car, soaked, gasping, sobbing. She didn't say a word, just slammed the gas and drove. Through the blur of rain, I looked back one last time. In the upstairs window, Mark stood watching, smiling. I never went back, but the crying followed me. Even in my new apartment miles away, I waked to the sound of a woman sobbing in the hallway. Sometimes faint, sometimes sharp. Always there. And I wonder if it was ever the house at all. Or if it's him. If Mark somehow planted it inside me, a sickness I can't shake. Because every night when the crying begins, I feel it. The weight of someone watching. And I know, without a doubt, that his smile is still out there. Waiting.